Mitford Tales of Old Japan, Chapter 3, Kazuma's Revenge. It is a maxim that he who lives by the sword shall die by the sword. In Japan, where there exists a large armed class over whom there is practically little or no control, party and clan broils, and single quarrels ending in bloodshed and death, are matters of daily occurrence. And it has been remarked that Edinburgh in former times, when clansmen, roistering through the streets at night, would pass from high words to deadly blows, forms perhaps the best European parallel to modern Yedo or Kyoto. It follows that of all his possessions, the samurai values most highly his sword, his constant companion, his ally, defensive and offensive. The price of a sword by a celebrated maker attains a great sum. A Japanese noble will sometimes be seen girding a sword, the blade of which, unmounted, is worth from 600 to 1,000 ryos, say from 200 pounds to 300 pounds, and the mounting, rich in cunning metal, work will be of corresponding value. These swords are transmitted as heirlooms from father to son, and become almost a part of the wearer's own self. Ieyasu, the founder of the last dynasty of shoguns, wrote in his legacy a code of rules prepared for the guidance of his successors and their advisors in government. The girded sword is the living soul of the samurai. In the case of a samurai forgetting his sword, act as is appointed. It may not be overlooked. The calling of a swordsmith is an honorable profession, its members being men of gentle blood. In a country where trade is regarded as degrading, it is singular to encounter this sole exception to the general rule. The traditions of the craft are many and curious. At the most critical moment of forging the sword, when the steel edge is being welded into the body of the iron blade, it is a practice still observed by old-fashioned armorers to put on the cap and robes of the kyuge, or nobles of the Mikado court, and closing the doors of the workshop, to labor in secrecy and freedom from interruption, the gloom heightening the mystery of the operation. Sometimes the occasion is even invested with a certain sanctity, a tasseled cord of straw, such as is hung before the shrines of the kami, or native gods of Japan, being suspended between two bamboo poles in the forge, which for the time is turned into a holy altar. At Osaka, I lived opposite to one Kusano Yoshiaki, a swordsmith, a most intelligent and amiable gentleman who was famed throughout his neighborhood for his good and charitable deeds. His notion was that, having been bred up to a calling which traffics in life and death, he was bound, so far as in him lay, to atone for this by endeavoring to alleviate the suffering which is in the world, and he carried out his principle to the point of impoverishing himself. No neighbor ever appealed to him in vain for help in tending the sick or burying the dead. No beggar or lazar was ever turned from his door without receiving some token of his bounty, whether in money or in kind. Nor was his scrupulous honesty less remarkable than his charity. While other smiths habitually earned large sums by counterfeiting the marks of the famous makers of old, he could boast that he had never sent out a weapon which bore any mark but his own. From his father and his forefathers, he inherited his trade, which, in his turn, he destined to hand over to his son, a hard, working, honest, and sturdy man, the clank of whose hammer and anvil may be heard from daybreak to sundown. The keen edge of the Japanese sword is notorious. It is asserted that the best blades will, in the hands of an expert swordsman, cut through the dead bodies of 3 men, laid one upon another, at a single blow. The swords of the shogun were wont to be tested upon the corpses of executed criminals. The public headsman was entrusted with the duty, and for a nose medicine, or bribe of 2 bus, about 3 shillings, would substitute the weapon of a private individual for that of his lord. Dogs and beggars, lying helpless by the roadside, not infrequently serve to test a ruffian sword, but the executioner earns many a fee from those who desire to see how their blades will sever a head. The statesman who shall enact a law forbidding the carrying of this deadly weapon will indeed have deserved well of his country, yet it will be a difficult task to attempt and a perilous one. I would not give much for that man life. The hand of every swashbuckler in the empire would be against him. The following history is in more senses than one a tale of a sword. About 250 years ago, Ikeda Kaneshoyu was lord of the province of Inaba. Among his retainers were two gentlemen, named Watanabe Yukie and Kawai Matazaemon, who were bound together by strong ties of friendship, and were in the habit of frequently visiting one another's houses. One day Yukie was sitting conversing with Matazaemon in the house of the latter, when all at once, a sword that lay in the raised part of the room caught his eye. As he saw it, he started and said, "Pray tell me, how came you by that sword?" "Well," replied the other, "as you know, when my lord Ikeda followed my lord Tokugawa Ieyasu to fight at Nagakude, my father went in his train, and it was at the Battle of Nagakude that he picked up this sword. My father went too, and was killed in the fight, and this sword, which was an heirloom in our family for many generations, was lost at that time. As it is of great value in my eyes, I do wish that, if you set no special store by it, you would have the great kindness to return it to me. That is an easy matter, and no more than one friend should do for another. Pray take it." Upon this, Yukie gratefully took the sword, and having carried it home, put it carefully away. At the beginning of the ensuing year, Matazaemon fell sick and died, and Yukie, mourning bitterly for the loss of his good friend, and anxious to requite the favor which he had received in the matter of his father's sword, performed many acts of kindness to the dead man's son, a young man 22 years of age, named Matagoro. Now this Matagoro was a base, hearted cur, who begrudged the sword that his father had given to Yukie, and complained publicly and often that Yukie had never made any present in return. And in this way, Yukie got a bad name in my lord palace as a stingy and a liberal man. But Yukie had a son, called Kazuma, a youth of 16 years, who served as one of the prince pages of honor. "Indeed," replied Kazuma, "my father received that sword from Matagoro father as a mark of friendship and good will, and considering that it would be an insult to send a present of money in return, thought to requite his kindness by acts of kindness towards Matagoro. I suppose it is money he wants." When Kazuma's service was over, he returned home and went to his father's room to tell him the report that was being spread in the palace, and begged him to send an ample present of money to Matagoro. Yukie reflected for a while and said, "You are too young to understand the right line of conduct in such matters. Matagoro father and myself were very close friends, so, seeing that he had ungrudgingly given me back the sword of my ancestors, I, thinking to requite his kindness at his death, rendered important services to Matagoro. It would be easy to finish the matter by sending a present of money, but I had rather take the sword and return it than be under an obligation to this mean churl, who knows not the laws which regulate the intercourse and dealings of men of gentle blood." So Yukie, in his anger, took the sword to Matagoro house and said to him, "I have come to your house this night for no other purpose than to restore to you the sword which your father gave me." And with this he placed the sword before Matagoro. "Indeed," answered the other, "I trust that you will not pain me by returning a present which my father made you." "Amongst men of gentle birth," said Yukie, laughing scornfully, "it is the custom to requite presents, in the first place by kindness, and afterwards by a suitable gift offered with a free heart. But it is no use talking to such as you, who are ignorant of the first principles of good breeding, so I have the honor to give you back the sword." As Yukie went on bitterly to reprove Matagoro, the latter waxed very wroth, and being a ruffian would have killed Yukie on the spot. But he, old man as he was a skillful swordsman, so Matagoro, craven-like, resolved to wait until he could attack him unawares. Little suspecting any treachery, Yukie began to return home, and Matagoro, under pretense of attending him to the door, came behind him with his sword drawn and cut him in the shoulder. The older man, turning round, drew and defended himself, but having received a severe wound in the first instance, he fainted away from loss of blood, and Matagoro slew him. The mother of Matagoro, startled by the noise, came out, and when she saw what had been done, she was afraid and cried, passionate man, what have you done? You are a murderer, and now your life will be forfeit. What terrible deed is this? I have killed him now, and there is nothing to be done. Come, mother, before the matter becomes known, let us fly together from this house. I will follow you. Do you go and seek out my lord Abe Shirogoro, a chief among the Hatamotos, who was my foster child. You had better fly to him for protection and remain in hiding. So the old woman persuaded her son to make his escape and sent him to the palace of Shirogoro. Now it happened that at this time the Hatamotos had formed themselves into a league against the powerful daimyos, and Abe Shirogoro, with 2 other noblemen, named Kondo Noburinasuke and Midzuno Jiuyémon, was at the head of the league. It followed, as a matter of course, that his forces were frequently recruited by vicious men who had no means of gaining their living, and whom he received and entreated kindly without asking any questions as to their antecedents. How much more, then, on being applied to for an asylum by the son of his own foster mother, did he willingly extend his patronage to him and guarantee him against all danger. So he called a meeting of the principal Hatamotos and introduced Matagoro to them, saying, "This man is a retainer of Ikeda Kaneshoyu, who, having cause of hatred against a man named Watanabe Yukie, has slain him and has fled to me for protection. This man mother suckled me when I was an infant, and right or wrong, I will befriend him. If therefore Ikeda Kaneshoyu should send to require me to deliver him up, I trust that you will one and all put forth your strength and help me to defend him." "Aye, that will we, with pleasure," replied Kondo Noburinasuke. "We have for some time had cause to complain of the scorn with which the daimyos have treated us. Let Ikeda Kaneshoyu send to claim this man, and we will show him the power of the Hatamotos." All the other Hatamotos, with one accord, applauded this determination and made ready their force for an armed resistance should my lord Kaneshoyu send to demand the surrender of Matagoro. But the latter remained a welcome guest in the house of Abe Shirogoro. Now when Watanabe Kazuma saw that, as the night advanced, his father Yukie did not return home, he grew anxious and went to the house of Matagoro to seek for him, and finding to his horror that he was murdered, fell upon the corpse and embraced it, weeping. On a sudden, it flashed across him that this must assuredly be the handiwork of Matagoro. So he rushed furiously into the house, determined to kill his father-murderer on the spot. But Matagoro had already fled, and he found only the mother, who was making her preparations for following her son to the house of Abe Shirogoro. So he bound the old woman and searched all over the house for her son. But seeing that his search was fruitless, he carried off the mother and handed her over to one of the elders of the clan, at the same time laying information against Matagoro as his father-murderer. When the affair was reported to the prince, he was very angry and ordered that the old woman should remain bound and be cast into prison until the whereabouts of her son should be discovered. Then Kazuma buried his father's corpse with great pomp, and the widow and the orphan mourned over their loss. It soon became known amongst the people of Abe Shirogoro that the mother of Matagoro had been imprisoned for her son's crime, and they at once set about planning her rescue. So they sent to the palace of my lord Kaneshoyu a messenger, who, when he was introduced to the counselor of the prince, said, "We have heard that, in consequence of the murder of Yukie, my lord has been pleased to imprison the mother of Matagoro. Our master Shirogoro has arrested the criminal and will deliver him up to you. But the mother has committed no crime, so we pray that she may be released from a cruel imprisonment. She was the foster mother of our master, and he would fain intercede to save her life. Should you consent to this, we, on our side, will give up the murderer and hand him over to you in front of our master gate tomorrow." The counselor repeated this message to the prince, who, in his pleasure at being able to give Kazuma his revenge on the morrow, immediately assented to the proposal, and the messenger returned triumphant at the success of the scheme. "We will immediately give him up to you, but as the mother and son are now about to bid an eternal farewell to one another, we beg you to be so kind as to tarry a little." With this, the retainers of Shirogoro led the old woman inside their master house, and Sasawo Daniemon remained waiting outside, until at last he grew impatient and ventured to hasten the people within. "We return you many thanks," replied they, "for your kindness in bringing us the mother. But as the son cannot go with you at present, you had better return home as quickly as possible. We are afraid we have put you to much trouble," and so they mocked him. When Daniemon saw that he had not only been cheated into giving up the old woman, but was being made a laughing stock into the bargain, he flew into a great rage and thought to break into the house and seize Matagoro and his mother by force. But peeping into the courtyard, he saw that it was filled with Hatamotos, carrying guns and naked swords. Not caring then to perish fighting a hopeless battle, and at the same time feeling that, after having been so duped, he would be put to shame before his lord, Sasawo Daniemon went to the burial place of his ancestors and disemboweled himself in front of their graves. When the prince heard how his messenger had been treated, he was indignant, and summoning his counselors resolved, although he was suffering from sickness, to collect his retainers and attack Abe Shirogoro. And the other chief daimyos, when the matter became publicly known, took up the cause and determined that the Hatamotos must be chastised for their insolence. On their side, the Hatamotos put forth all their efforts to resist the daimyos. So Yedo became disturbed, and the riotous state of the city occasioned great anxiety to the government, who took counsel together how they might restore peace. As the Hatamotos were directly under the orders of the shogun, it was not difficult to suppress them. The hard question to solve was how to put a restraint upon the great daimyos. However, one of the Gorojin, named Matsudera Idzu no Kami, a man of great intelligence, devised a plan by which he might secure this end. There was at this time in the service of the shogun a physician, named Nakarai Tsusen, who was in the habit of frequenting the palace of my lord Kaneshoyu, and who for some time past had been treating him for the disease from which he was suffering. Idzu no Kami sent secretly for this physician, and, summoning him to his private room, engaged him in conversation, in the midst of which he suddenly dropped his voice and said to him in a whisper, "Listen, Tsusen. You have received great favors at the hands of the shogun. The government is now sorely straitened. Are you willing to carry your loyalty so far as to lay down your life on its behalf? I, my lord, for generations my forefathers have held their property by the grace of the shogun. I am willing this night to lay down my life for my prince, as a faithful vassal should. Well then, I will tell you. The great daimyos and the Hatamotos have fallen out about this affair of Matagoro, and lately it has seemed as if they meant to come to blows. The country will be agitated, and the farmers and townsfolk suffer great misery if we cannot quell the tumult. The Hatamotos will be easily kept under, but it will be no light task to pacify the great daimyos. If you are willing to lay down your life in carrying out a stratagem of mine, peace will be restored to the country, but your loyalty will be your death. I am ready to sacrifice my life in this service. This is my plan. You have been attending my lord Kaneshoyu in his sickness. Tomorrow you must go to see him and put poison in his physic. If we can kill him, the agitation will cease. This is the service which I ask of you." Tsusen consented to undertake the deed, and on the following day, when he went to see Kaneshoyu, he carried with him poisoned drugs. Half the draught he drank himself, and thus put the prince off his guard, so that he swallowed the remainder without misgiving. Tsusen, seeing this, hurried away, and as he was carried home in his litter, the death agony seized him, and he died, vomiting blood. My lord Kaneshoyu died in the same way in great torture, and in the confusion attending his death and funeral ceremonies, the struggle which was impending with the Hatamotos was delayed. Accordingly, the 3 Hatamotos, after having been severely admonished, were confined in a temple called Kanieji, and the remaining Hatamotos, frightened by this example, dispersed in peace. As for the great daimyos, inasmuch as after the death of my lord Kaneshoyu the Hatamotos were all dispersed, There was no enemy left for them to fight with, so the tumult was quelled and peace was restored. Thus it happened that Matagoro lost his patron, so, taking his mother with him, he went and placed himself under the protection of an old man named Sakurai Jiuyémon. This old man was a celebrated teacher of lance exercise and enjoyed both wealth and honor. So he took in Matagoro, and having engaged as a guard 30 rōnins, all resolute fellows and well-skilled in the arts of war, they all fled together to a distant place called Sagara. All this time, Watanabe Kazuma had been brooding over his father's death and pondering how he should be revenged upon the murderer. So when my lord Kaneshoyu suddenly died, he went to the young prince who succeeded him and obtained leave of absence to go and seek out his father's enemy. Now Kazuma's elder sister was married to a man named Araki Matayamon, who at that time was celebrated as the first swordsman in Japan. As Kazuma was but 16 years of age, this Matayamon, taking into consideration his near relationship as son-in-law to the murdered man, resolved to go forth with the lad as his guardian and help him to seek out Matagoro. And 2 of Matayamon retainers, named Ishidame Busuke and Ikezoye Magohachi, made up their minds at all hazards to follow their master. The latter, when he heard their intention, thanked them, but refused the offer, saying that as he was now about to engage in a vendetta in which his life would be continually in jeopardy, and as it would be a lasting grief to him should either of them receive a wound in such a service, he must beg them to renounce their intention. But they answered, "Master, this is a cruel speech of yours. All these years have we received naught but kindness and favors at your hands, and now that you are engaged in the pursuit of this murderer, we desire to follow you, and if needs must, to lay down our lives in your service. Furthermore, we have heard that the friends of this Matagoro are no fewer than 36 men. So, however bravely you may fight, you will be in peril from the superior numbers of your enemy. However, if you are pleased to persist in your refusal to take us, we have made up our minds that there is no resource for us but to disembowel ourselves on the spot." When Matayamon and Kazuma heard these words, they marveled at these faithful and brave men and were moved to tears. Then Matayamon said, "The kindness of you 2 brave fellows is without precedent. Well then, I will accept your services gratefully." Then the 2 men, having obtained their wish, cheerfully followed their master, and the 4 set out together upon their journey to seek out Matagoro, of whose whereabouts they were entirely ignorant. Matagoro in the meanwhile had made his way, with the old man Sakurai Jiuyémon and his 30 rōnins, to Osaka. But strong as they were in numbers, they traveled in great secrecy. So they went on their way with great caution, and having reached Osaka, put up at an inn in a quarter called Ikutama, and hid from Kazuma and Matayamon. The latter also in good time reached Osaka, and spared no pains to seek out Matagoro. So he concealed himself in a dark place and watched, and heard the fellow say, "My master, Sakurai Jiuyémon, is about to start for Sagara tomorrow morning to return thanks to the gods for his recovery from a sickness from which he has been suffering, so I am in a great hurry." With these words, the servant hastened away, and Matayamon, entering the shop, called for some porridge, and as he ate it, made inquiries as to the man who had just given so large an order for buckwheat porridge. The master of the shop answered that he was the attendant of a party of 36 gentlemen who were staying at such and such an inn. Then Matayamon, having discovered all that he wished to know, went home and told Kazuma, who was delighted at the prospect of carrying his revenge into execution on the morrow. That same evening, Matayamon sent one of his 2 faithful retainers as a spy to the inn, to find out at what hour Matagoro was to set out on the following morning. And he learned from the servants of the inn that the party was to start at daybreak for Sagara, stopping at Ise to worship at the shrine of Tersho Daijin. Matayamon made his preparations accordingly, and with Kazuma and his 2 retainers, started before dawn. Beyond Yedo, in the province of Iga, the castle town of the daimyo Todo Idzumi no Kami, there is a wide and lonely moor, and this was the place upon which they fixed for the attack upon the enemy. And should the rōnins attempt to rescue Matagoro, it will be your duty to prevent them and succor Kazuma. And having further laid down each man duties with great minuteness, they lay in wait for the arrival of the enemy. Whilst they rested in the tea house, the governor of the castle town arrived, and asking for Matayamon said, "I have the honor to be the governor of the castle town of Todo Idzumi no Kami." When Matayamon and Kazuma had expressed their thanks for his lordship's gracious kindness, the governor took his leave and returned home. At length, the enemy train was seen in the distance. First came Sakurai Jiuyémon and his younger brother Jinsuke, and next to them followed Kawai Matagoro and Takenouchi Genton. These 4 men, who were the bravest and foremost of the band of rōnins, rode on pack, horses, and the remainder marched on foot, keeping close together. As they drew near, Kazuma, who was impatient to avenge his father, stepped boldly forward and shouted in a loud voice, "Here stand I, Kazuma, the son of Yukie, whom you, Matagoro, treacherously slew, determined to avenge my father's death. Come forth then and do battle with me, and let us see which of us twain is the better man." And before the rōnins had recovered from their astonishment, Matayamon said, "I, Erike Matayamon, the son-in-law of Yukie, have come to second Kazuma in his deed of vengeance. Win or lose, you must give us battle." When the 36 men heard the name of Matayamon, they were greatly afraid, but Sakurai Jiuyémon urged them to be upon their guard and leaped from his horse, and Matayamon, springing forward with his drawn sword, cleft him from the shoulder to the nipple of his breast, so that he fell dead. Sakurai Jinsuke, seeing his brother killed before his eyes, grew furious and shot an arrow at Matayamon, who deftly cut the shaft in 2 with his dirk as it flew. And Jinsuke, amazed at this feat, threw away his bow and attacked Matayamon, who, with his sword in his right hand and his dirk in his left, fought with desperation. The other rōnins attempted to rescue Jinsuke, and in the struggle, Kazuma, who had engaged Matagoro, became separated from Matayamon, whose 2 retainers, Busuke and Magohachi, bearing in mind their master orders, killed 5 rōnins who had attacked Kazuma, but were themselves badly wounded. In the meantime, Matayamon, who had killed 7 of the rōnins, and who the harder he was pressed the more bravely he fought, soon cut down 3 more, and the remainder dared not approach him. Matayamon, hearing this, was rejoiced, and fought with renewed vigor. Then one of the rōnins, named Takenouchi Genton, a very brave man, leaving his companions to do battle with Matayamon, came to the rescue of Matagoro, who was being hotly pressed by Kazuma, and in attempting to prevent this, Busuke fell covered with wounds. His companion Magohachi, seeing him fall, was in great anxiety, for should any harm happen to Kazuma, what excuse could he make to Matayamon? So, wounded as he was, he too engaged Takenouchi Genton, and being crippled by the gashes he had received, was in deadly peril. Then the man who had come up from the castle town to act as Matayamon's second cried out, "See there, Sir Matayamon, your follower who is fighting with Genton is in great danger. Do you go to his rescue, and second Sir Kazuma, I will give an account of the others. Great thanks to you, sir. I will go and second Kazuma." So Matayamon went to help Kazuma, whilst his second and the infantry soldiers kept back the surviving rōnins, who, already wearied by their fight with Matayamon, were unfit for any further exertion. Kazuma, meanwhile, was still fighting with Matagoro, and the issue of the conflict was doubtful. And Takenouchi Genton, in his attempt to rescue Matagoro, was being kept at bay by Magohachi, who, weakened by his wounds and blinded by the blood which streamed into his eyes from a cut in the forehead, had given himself up for lost when Matayamon came and cried, "Be of good cheer, Magohachi. It is I, Matayamon, who have come to the rescue. You are badly hurt. Get out of harm's way and rest yourself." Then Magohachi, who until then had been sustained by his anxiety for Kazuma's safety, gave in and fell fainting from loss of blood, and Matayamon bested and slew Genton. And even then, although he had received 2 wounds, he was not exhausted, but drew near to Kazuma and said, "Courage, Kazuma." The rōnins are all killed, and there now remains only Matagoro, your father-murderer. Fight and win. The youth, thus encouraged, redoubled his efforts, but Matagoro, losing heart, quailed and fell. So Kazuma's vengeance was accomplished, and the desire of his heart fulfilled. The two faithful retainers, who had died in their loyalty, were buried with great ceremony, and Kazuma carried the head of Matagoro and piously laid it upon his father's tomb. So ends the tale of Kazuma Revenge. I fear that stories in which killing and bloodshed form the principal features can hardly enlist much sympathy in these peaceful days. Still, when such tales are grounded upon history, they are instructive to students of social phenomena. The story of Kazuma Revenge is interwoven with events which at the present time are peculiarly significant. I mean the feud between the great daimyos and the Hatamotos. Those who have followed the modern history of Japan will see that the recent struggle, which has ended in the ruin of the tycoon power and the abolition of his office, was the outburst of a hidden fire which had been smoldering for centuries. But the repressive might have been gradually weakened, and contact with Western powers had rendered still more odious a feudality which men felt to be out of date. The revolution which has ended in the triumph of the daimyos over the tycoon is also the triumph of the vassal over his feudal lord, and is the harbinger of political life to the people at large. In the time of Ieyasu, the burden might be hateful, but it had to be borne, and so it would have been to this day, had not circumstances from without broken the spell. The Japanese daimyo, in advocating the isolation of his country, was hugging the very yoke which he hated. Strange to say, however, there are still men who, while they embrace the new political creed, yet praise the past, and look back with regret upon the day when Japan stood alone, without part or share in the great family of nations. Mitford, Tales of Old Japan, Chapter 4, a story of the Otokodate of Yedo. Being the supplement of the story of Gompchi and Komurasaki. The word Otokodate occurs several times in these tales, and as I cannot convey its full meaning by a simple translation, I must preserve it in the text, explaining it by the following note, taken from the Japanese of a native scholar. The Otokodate were friendly associations of brave men bound together by an obligation to stand by one another in weal or in woe, regardless of their own lives, and without inquiring into one another's antecedents. A bad man, however, having joined the Otokodate must forsake his evil ways, for their principle was to treat the oppressor as an enemy and to help the feeble as a father does his child. If they had money, they gave it to those that had none, and their charitable deeds won for them the respect of all men. The head of the society was called its father. If any of the others, who were his apprentices, were homeless, they lived with the father and served him, paying him at the same time a small fee, in consideration of which, if they fell sick or into misfortune, he took charge of them and assisted them. The father of the Otokodate pursued the calling of farming out coolies to the daimyos and great personages for their journeys to and from Yedo, and in return for this received from them rations in rice. He had more influence with the lower classes even than the officials, and if the coolies had struck work or refused to accompany a daimyo on his journey, a word from the father would produce as many men as might be required. When Prince Tokugawa Ieyasu, the last but one of the shoguns, left Yedo for Kyoto, one Shimon Tatsugoro, chief of the Otokodate, undertook the management of his journey, and some 3 or 4 years ago was raised to the dignity of Hatamoto for many faithful services. After the Battle of Fushimi and the abolition of the shogunate, he accompanied the last of the shoguns in his retirement. In old days, there were also Otokodate among the Hatamotos. This was after the civil wars of the time of Ieyasu, when, though the country was at peace, the minds of men were still in a state of high excitement and could not be reconciled to the dullness of a state of rest. It followed that broils and faction fights were continually taking place among the young men of the samurai class, and that those who distinguished themselves by their personal strength and valor were looked up to as captains. Leagues after the manner of those existing among the German students were formed in different quarters of the city under various names and used to fight for the honor of victory. When the country became more thoroughly tranquil, the custom of forming these leagues amongst gentlemen fell into disuse. The past tense is used in speaking even of the Otokodate of the lower classes, for although they nominally exist, they have no longer the power and importance which they enjoyed at the time to which these stories belong. They then, like the prentices of old London, played a considerable part in the society of the great cities, and that man was lucky, were he gentle samurai or simple wardsman, who could claim the father of the Otokodate for his friend. The word, taken by itself, means a manly or plucky fellow. Chobai of Banzuin was the chief of the Otokodate of Yedo. He was originally called Itaro, and was the son of a certain rōnin who lived in the country. One day, when he was only 10 years of age, he went out with a playfellow to bathe in the river. And as the two were playing, they quarreled over their game, and Itaro, seizing the other boy, threw him into the river and drowned him. Then he went home and said to his father, "I went a play by the river today with a friend, and as he was rude to me, I threw him into the water and killed him." When his father heard him speak thus, quite calmly, as if nothing had happened, he was thunderstruck and said, "This is indeed a fearful thing. Child as you are, you will have to pay the penalty of your deed. So tonight you must fly to Yedo in secret and take service with some noble samurai, and perhaps in time you may become a soldier yourself." With these words, he gave him 20 ounces of silver and a fine sword, made by the famous swordsmith Funatoshi, and sent him out of the province with all dispatch. The following morning, the parents of the murdered child came to claim that Itaro should be given up to their vengeance. But it was too late, and all they could do was to bury their child and mourn for his loss. Itaro made his way to Yedo in hot haste, and there found employment as a shop boy. But soon tiring of that sort of life, and burning to become a soldier, he found means at last to enter the service of a certain Hatamoto called Sakurai Jiuyémon, and changed his name to Tsunéhei. Now this Sakurai Jiuyémon had a son, called Shanosuke, a young man in his 17th year, who grew so fond of Tsunéhei that he took him with him wherever he went, and treated him in all ways as an equal. When Shanosuke went to the fencing, school Tsunéhei would accompany him, and thus, as he was by nature strong and active, soon became a good swordsman. One day, when Jiuyémon had gone out, his son Shanosuke said to Tsunéhei, "You know how fond my father is of playing at football. It must be great sport. As he has gone out today, suppose you and I have a game." "That will be rare sport," answered Tsunéhei. "Let us make haste and play before my lord comes home." So the two boys went out into the garden and began trying to kick the football, but lacking skill, do what they would, they could not lift it from the ground. At last Shanosuke, with a vigorous kick, raised the football, but having missed his aim, it went tumbling over the wall into the next garden, which belonged to one Hikasaka Zenpachi, a teacher of lance exercise, who was known to be a surly, ill-tempered fellow. "Oh dear, what shall we do?" said Shanosuke. "We have lost my father football in his absence, and if we go and ask for it back from that churlish neighbor of ours, we shall only be scolded and sworn at for our pains." "Oh, never mind," answered Tsunéhei. "I will go and apologize for our carelessness and get the football back." "Well, but then you will be chidden, and I do not want that." "Never mind me." Little care I for his cross words. So Tsunéhei went to the next doorhouse to reclaim the ball. Now it so happened that Zenpachi, the surly neighbor, had been walking in his garden whilst the two youths were playing. And as he was admiring the beauty of his favorite chrysanthemums, the football came flying over the wall and struck him full in the face. Zenpachi, not used to anything but flattery and coaxing, flew into a violent rage at this. And while he was thinking how he would revenge himself upon anyone who might be sent to ask for the lost ball, Tsunehei came in and said to one of Zenpachi's servants, "I am sorry to say that in my lord's absence I took his football, and in trying to play with it, clumsily kicked it over your wall. I beg you to excuse my carelessness and to be so good as to give me back the ball." The servant went in and repeated this to Zenpachi, who worked himself up into a great rage and ordered Tsunehei to be brought before him and said, "Here, fellow, is your name Tsunehei?" "Yes, sir, at your service." "I am almost afraid to ask pardon for my carelessness, but please forgive me and let me have the ball. I thought your master, Jiuyémon, was to blame for this, but it seems that it was you who kicked the football." "Yes, sir." "I am sure I am very sorry for what I have done." "Please, may I ask for the ball?" said Tsunehei, bowing humbly. For a while Zenpachi made no answer, but at length he said, "Do you know, villain, that your dirty football struck me in the face? I ought by rights to kill you on the spot for this, but I will spare your life this time, so take your football and be off." And with that he went up to Tsunehei and beat him, and kicked him in the head and spat in his face. Then Tsunehei, who up to that time had demeaned himself very humbly, in his eagerness to get back the football, jumped up in a fury and said, "I made ample apologies to you for my carelessness, and now you have insulted and struck me. Ill-mannered ruffian, take back the ball, I will none of it." And he drew his dirk, and cutting the football in two, threw it at Zenpachi and returned home. But Zenpachi, growing more and more angry, called one of his servants and said to him, "That fellow Tsunehei has been most insolent. Go next door and find out Jiuyémon, and tell him that I have ordered you to bring back Tsunehei, that I may kill him." So the servant went to deliver the message. In the meantime, Tsunehei went back to his master's house, and when Shanosuke saw him, he said, "Well, of course you have been ill-treated, but did you get back the football? When I went in, I made many apologies, but I was beaten and kicked in the head and treated with the greatest indignity. I would have killed that wretch, Zenpachi, at once, but that I knew that, if I did so while I was yet a member of your household, I should bring trouble upon your family. For your sake I bore this ill treatment patiently, but now I pray you let me take leave of you and become a rōnin, that I may be revenged upon this man." "Think well what you are doing," answered Shanosuke. "After all, we have only lost a football, and my father will not care, nor upbraid us." But Tsunehei would not listen to him, and was bent upon wiping out the affront that he had received. As they were talking, the messenger arrived from Zenpachi, demanding the surrender of Tsunehei, on the ground that he had insulted him. To this, Shanosuke replied that his father was away from home, and that in his absence he could do nothing. At last Jiuyémon came home, and when he heard what had happened, he was much grieved, and at a loss what to do, when a second messenger arrived from Zenpachi, demanding that Tsunehei should be given up without delay. "Sir," answered Tsunehei, with tears of gratitude for his lord's kindness, "from my heart I thank you for your great goodness, but I have been insulted and trampled upon, and if I lay down my life in the attempt, I will repay Zenpachi for what he has this day done. Well, then, since you needs must be revenged, go and fight, and may success attend you. Still, as much depends upon the blade you carry, and I fear yours is likely to be but a sorry weapon, I will give you a sword." And with this, he offered Tsunehei his own. "Nay, my lord," replied Tsunehei, "I have a famous sword by Raikunitoshi which my father gave me. I have never shown it to your lordship, but I have it safely stowed away in my room." When Jiuyémon saw and examined the sword, he admired it greatly and said, "This is indeed a beautiful blade, and one on which you may rely. Take it then and bear yourself nobly in the fight. Only remember that Zenpachi is a cunning spearsman, and be sure to be very cautious." So Tsunehei, after thanking his lord for his manifold kindnesses, took an affectionate leave and went to Zenpachi's house and said to the servant, "It seems that your master wants to speak to me. Be so good as to take me to see him." So the servant led him into the garden, where Zenpachi, spear in hand, was waiting to kill him. When Zenpachi saw him, he cried out, "Ha, so you have come back, and now for your insolence this day I mean to kill you with my own hand." "Insolent yourself," replied Tsunehei. "Beast and no samurai. Come, let us see which of us is the better man." Furiously incensed, Zenpachi thrust with his spear at Tsunehei, but he, trusting to his good sword, attacked Zenpachi, who, cunning warrior as he was, could gain no advantage. At last Zenpachi, losing his temper, began fighting less carefully, so that Tsunehei found an opportunity of cutting the shaft of his spear. Zenpachi then drew his sword, and 2 of his retainers came up to assist him, but Tsunehei killed one of them and wounded Zenpachi in the forehead. The second retainer fled affrighted at the youth's valor, and Zenpachi was blinded by the blood which flowed from the wound on his forehead. Then Tsunehei said, "To kill one who is as a blind man were unworthy a soldier. Wipe the blood from your eyes, Sir Zenpachi, and let us fight it out fairly." So Zenpachi, wiping away his blood, bound a kerchief round his head and fought again desperately. But at last, the pain of his wound and the loss of blood overcame him, and Tsunehei cut him down with a wound in the shoulder and easily dispatched him. Then Tsunehei went and reported the whole matter to the governor of Yedo, and was put in prison until an inquiry could be made. But the chief priest of Banzuin, who had heard of the affair, went and told the governor all the bad deeds of Zenpachi, and having procured Tsunehei pardon, took him home and employed him as porter in the temple. So Tsunehei changed his name to Chobai, and earned much respect in the neighborhood, both for his talents and for his many good works. If any man were in distress, he would help him, heedless of his own advantage or danger, until men came to look up to him as to a father, and many youths joined him and became his apprentices. So he built a house at Hanakawato, in Asakusa, and lived there with his apprentices, whom he farmed out as spearsmen and footmen to the daimyos and hatamotos, taking for himself the tithe of their earnings. But if any of them were sick or in trouble, Chobai would nurse and support them, and provide physicians and medicine. And the fame of his goodness went abroad, until his apprentices were more than 2,000 men, and were employed in every part of the city. But as for Chobai, the more he prospered, the more he gave in charity, and all men praised his good and generous heart. This was the time when the Hatamotos had formed themselves into bands of Otokodate, of which Midzuno Jiuyémon, Kondo Noburinasuke, and Abe Shirogoro were the chiefs. And the leagues of the nobles despised the leagues of the wardsmen, and treated them with scorn, and tried to put to shame Chobai and his brave men. But the nobles' weapons recoiled upon themselves, and whenever they tried to bring contempt upon Chobai, they themselves were brought to ridicule. So there was great hatred on both sides. One day that Chobai went to divert himself in a tea house in the Yashiwara, he saw a felt carpet spread in an upper room, which had been adorned as for some special occasion, and he asked the master of the house what guest of distinction was expected. The landlord replied that my lord Jiuyémon, the chief of the Otokodate of the Hatamotos, was due there that afternoon. On hearing this, Chobai replied that as he much wished to meet my lord Jiuyémon, he would lie down and await his coming. The landlord was put out at this, and knew not what to say, but yet he dare not thwart Chobai, the powerful chief of the Otokodate. So Chobai took off his clothes, and laid himself down upon the carpet. After a while my lord Jiuyémon arrived, and going upstairs found a man of large stature lying naked upon the carpet which had been spread for him. "What low ruffian is this?" shouted he angrily to the landlord. "My lord, it is Chobai, the chief of the Otokodate," answered the man, trembling. Jiuyémon at once suspected that Chobai was doing this to insult him, so he sat down by the side of the sleeping man, and lighting his pipe began to smoke. When he had finished his pipe, he emptied the burning ashes into Chobai's navel, but Chobai, patiently bearing the pain, still feigned sleep. 10 times did Jiuyémon fill his pipe, and 10 times he shook out the burning ashes onto Chobai's navel, but he neither stirred nor spoke. Then Jiuyémon, astonished at his fortitude, shook him and roused him, saying, "Chobai, Chobai, wake up, man." "What is the matter?" said Chobai, rubbing his eyes as though he were awaking from a deep sleep. Then seeing Jiuyémon, he pretended to be startled and said, "Oh, my lord, I know not who you are, but I have been very rude to your lordship. I was overcome with wine and fell asleep. I pray your lordship to forgive me." "Is your name Chobai?" "Yes, my lord, at your service." "A poor wardsman and ignorant of good manners, I have been very rude, but I pray your lordship to excuse my ill breeding." Nay, nay, we have all heard the fame of Chobai of Banzuin, and I hold myself lucky to have met you this day. Let us be friends. It is a great honor for a humble wardsman to meet a nobleman face to face." As they were speaking, the waitresses brought in fish and wine, and Jiuyémon pressed Chobai to feast with him, and thinking to annoy Chobai, offered him a large wine cup which, however, he drank without shrinking, and then returned to his entertainer, who was by no means so well able to bear the fumes of the wine. Then Jiuyémon hit upon another device for annoying Chobai, and hoping to frighten him, said, "Here, Chobai, let me offer you some fish." And with those words he drew his sword, and picking up a cake of baked fish upon the point of it, thrust it towards the wardsman's mouth. Any ordinary man would have been afraid to accept the morsel so roughly offered, but Chobai simply opened his mouth, and taking the cake off the sword point ate it without wincing. Whilst Jiuyémon was wondering in his heart what manner of man this was, that nothing could daunt, Chobai said to him, "This meeting with your lordship has been an auspicious occasion to me, and I would fain ask leave to offer some humble gift to your lordship in memory of it. Is there anything which your lordship would specially fancy? I am very fond of cold macaroni. Then I shall have the honor of ordering some for your lordship." And with this Chobai went downstairs, and calling one of his apprentices, named Tokengame, who was waiting for him, gave him 100 ryos, about 20 pounds, 8 pounds, and bade him collect all the cold macaroni to be found in the neighboring cook shops and pile it up in front of the tea house. So Game went home, and, collecting Chobai apprentices, sent them out in all directions to buy the macaroni. Jiuyémon all this while was thinking of the pleasure he would have in laughing at Chobai for offering him a mean and paltry present. But when, by degrees, the macaroni began to be piled mountain, high around the tea house, he saw that he could not make a fool of Chobai, and went home discomfited. It has already been told how Shurai Gunpachi was befriended and helped by Chobai. His name will occur again in this story. At this time there lived in the province of Yamato a certain daimyo, called Honda Daineki, who one day, when surrounded by several of his retainers, produced a sword, and bade them look at it, and say from what smith workshop the blade had come. "I think this must be a Masamune blade," said one Fuwa Banzuémon. "No," said Nagoya Sanza, after examining the weapon attentively. "This certainly is a Muramasa." A third samurai, named Takagi Yumanojo, pronounced it to be the work of Shizu Kanenji, and as they could not agree but each maintained his opinion, their lord sent for a famous connoisseur to decide the point, and the sword proved, as Sanza had said, to be a genuine Muramasa. Sanza was delighted at the verdict, but the other two went home rather crestfallen. Yumanojo, although he had been worsted in the argument, bore no malice nor ill will in his heart. But Banzuémon, who was a vainglorious personage, puffed up with the idea of his own importance, conceived a spite against Sanza, and watched for an opportunity to put him to shame. At last, one day Banzuémon, eager to be revenged upon Sanza, went to the prince and said, "Your lordship ought to see Sanza fence. His swordsmanship is beyond all praise. I know that I am no match for him. Still, if it will please your lordship, I will try a bout with him." And the prince, who was a mere stripling and thought it would be rare sport, immediately sent for Sanza and desired he would fence with Banzuémon. So the two went out into the garden and stood up facing each other, armed with wooden swords. Now Banzuémon was proud of his skill and thought he had no equal in fencing. So he expected to gain an easy victory over Sansa, and promised himself the luxury of giving his adversary a beating that should fully make up for the mortification which he had felt in the matter of the dispute about the sword. It happened, however, that he had undervalued the skill of Sansa, who, when he saw that his adversary was attacking him savagely and in good earnest, by a rapid blow struck Banziaman so sharply on the wrist that he dropped the sword, and before he could pick it up again, delivered a second cut on the shoulder, which sent him rolling over in the dust. All the officers present, seeing this, praised Sansa's skill, and Banziaman, utterly stricken with shame, ran away home and hid himself. After this affair, Sansa rose high in the favor of his lord, and Banziaman, who was more than ever jealous of him, feigned sickness and stayed at home devising schemes for Sansa ruin. Now it happened that the prince, wishing to have the Muramasa blade mounted, sent for Sansa and entrusted it to his care, ordering him to employ the most cunning workmen in the manufacture of the scabbard, hilt, and ornaments. And Sansa, having received the blade, took it home and put it carefully away. When Banziaman heard of this, he was overjoyed, for he saw that his opportunity for revenge had come. He determined, if possible, to kill Sansa, but at any rate to steal the sword which had been committed to his care by the prince, knowing full well that if Sansa lost the sword, he and his family would be ruined. Being a single man, without wife or child, he sold his furniture, and turning all his available property into money, made ready to fly the country. When his preparations were concluded, he went in the middle of the night to Sansa's house and tried to get in by stealth, but the doors and shutters were all carefully bolted from the inside, and there was no hole by which he could effect an entrance. All was still, however, and the people of the house were evidently fast asleep, so he climbed up to the second story, and having contrived to unfasten a window, made his way in. With soft, cat-like footsteps he crept downstairs, and looking into one of the rooms, saw Sansa and his wife sleeping on the mats, with their little son Casanza, a boy of 13, curled up in his quilt between them. The light in the night lamp was at its last flicker, but peering through the gloom, he could just see the prince's famous Muramasa sword lying on a sword rack in the raised part of the room. So he crawled stealthily along until he could reach it, and stuck it in his girdle. Then, drawing near to Sansa, he bestrode his sleeping body, and brandishing the sword made a thrust at his throat. But in his excitement his hand shook, so that he missed his aim, and only scratched Sansa, who, waking with a start and trying to jump up, felt himself held down by a man standing over him. Stretching out his hands, he would have wrestled with his enemy, when Banziaman, leaping back, kicked over the night lamp, and throwing open the shutters, dashed into the garden. Snatching up his sword, Sansa rushed out after him, and his wife, having lit a lantern and armed herself with a halberd, went out with her son Casanza, who carried a drawn dirk to help her husband. Then Banziaman, who was hiding in the shadow of a large pine tree, seeing the lantern and dreading detection, seized a stone and hurled it at the light, and chancing to strike it, put it out, and then scrambling over the fence unseen, fled into the darkness. When Sansa had searched all over the garden in vain, he returned to his room and examined his wound, which proving very slight, he began to look about to see whether the thief had carried off anything. But when his eye fell upon the place where the Muramasa sword had lain, he saw that it was gone. He hunted everywhere, but it was not to be found. The precious blade with which his prince had entrusted him had been stolen, and the blame would fall heavily upon him. Filled with grief and shame at the loss, Sansa and his wife and child remained in great anxiety until the morning broke, when he reported the matter to one of the prince's counselors, and waited in seclusion until he should receive his lord's commands. It soon became known that Banziaman, who had fled the province, was the thief, and the counselors made their report accordingly to the prince, who, although he expressed his detestation of the mean action of Banziaman, could not absolve Sansa from blame, in that he had not taken better precautions to ensure the safety of the sword that had been committed to his trust. It was decided, therefore, that Sansa should be dismissed from his service, and that his goods should be confiscated, with the proviso that should he be able to find Banzayémon and recover the lost Muramasa blade, he should be restored to his former position. Sansa, who from the first had made up his mind that his punishment would be severe, accepted the decree without a murmur, and, having committed his wife and son to the care of his relations, prepared to leave the country as a rōnin and search for Banzayémon. Before starting, however, he thought that he would go to his brother, officer Takagi Yumanojo, and consult with him as to what course he should pursue to gain his end. But this Yumanojo, who was by nature a churlish fellow, answered him unkindly and said, "It is true that Banzayémon is a mean thief, but still it was through your carelessness that the sword was lost. It is of no avail your coming to me for help. You must get it back as best you may." "Ah," replied Sansa, "I see that you too bear me a grudge because I defeated you in the matter of the judgment of the sword. You are no better than Banzayémon yourself." And his heart was bitter against his fellow men, and he left the house determined to kill Yumanojo first and afterwards to track out Banzayémon. So, pretending to start on his journey, he hid in an inn and waited for an opportunity to attack Yumanojo. One day Yumanojo, who was very fond of fishing, had taken his son Yumanasuke, a lad of 16, down to the sea shore with him. And as the two were enjoying themselves, all of a sudden they perceived a samurai running towards them, and when he drew near they saw that it was Sansa. Yumanojo, thinking that Sansa had come back in order to talk over some important matter, left his angling and went to meet him. Then Sansa cried out, "Now, Sir Yumanojo, draw and defend yourself." "What? Were you in league with Banzayémon to vent your spite upon me?" "Draw, sir, draw. You have spirited away your accomplice, but at any rate you are here yourself and shall answer for your deed. It is no use playing the innocent. Your astonished face shall not save you. Defend yourself, coward and traitor." And with these words, Sansa flourished his naked sword. "Nay, Sir Sansa," replied the other, anxious by a soft answer to turn away his wrath, "I am innocent of this deed." "Waste not your valor on so poor a cause." "Lying knave," said Sansa, "think not that you can impose upon me. I know your treacherous heart." And, rushing upon Yumanojo, he cut him on the forehead so that he fell in agony upon the sand. Yumanasuke, in the meanwhile, who had been fishing at some distance from his father, rushed up when he saw him in this perilous situation and threw a stone at Sansa, hoping to distract his attention. But before he could reach the spot, Sansa had delivered the death blow, and Yumanojo lay a corpse upon the beach. "Stop, Sir Sansa, murderer of my father," cried Yumanasuke, drawing his sword. "Stop and do battle with me that I may avenge his death." "That you should wish to slay your father enemy," replied Sansa, "is but right and proper, and although I had just cause of quarrel with your father and killed him as a samurai should, yet would I gladly forfeit my life to you here. But my life is precious to me for one purpose, that I may punish Banzayémon and get back the stolen sword. When I shall have restored that sword to my lord, then will I give you your revenge, and you may kill me. A soldier word is truth, but as a pledge that I will fulfill my promise, I will give to you, as hostages, my wife and boy. Stay your avenging hand, I pray you, until my desire shall have been attained." Yumanasuke, who was a brave and honest youth, as famous in the clan for the goodness of his heart as for his skill in the use of arms, when he heard Sansa's humble petition, relented and said, "I agree to wait and will take your wife and boy as hostages for your return." "I humbly thank you," said Sansa. "When I shall have chastised Banzayémon, I will return, and you shall claim your revenge." So Sansa went his way to Yedo to seek for Banzayémon, and Yumanasuke mourned over his father's grave. Now Banzayémon, when he arrived in Yedo, found himself friendless and without the means of earning his living, when by accident he heard of the fame of Chobai of Banzuin, the chief of the Otokodate, to whom he applied for assistance, and having entered the fraternity, supported himself by giving fencing lessons. He had been plying his trade for some time, and had earned some little reputation, when Sansa reached the city and began his search for him. But the days and months passed away, and after a year fruitless seeking, Sansa, who had spent all his money without obtaining a clue to the whereabouts of his enemy, was sorely perplexed and was driven to live by his wits as a fortune teller. Work as he would, it was a hard matter for him to gain the price of his daily food, and in spite of all his pains, his revenge seemed as far off as ever, when he bethought him that the Yashiwara was one of the most bustling places in the city, and that if he kept watch there, sooner or later he would be sure to fall in with Banziaman. So he bought a hat of plaited bamboo that completely covered his face and lay in wait at the Yashiwara. One day Banziaman and two of Chobai apprentices Tokengame and Shirobai, who, from his wild and indocile nature was surnamed the Colt, were amusing themselves and drinking in an upper story of a tea house in the Yashiwara, when Tokengame, happening to look down upon the street below, saw a samurai pass by, poorly clad in worn-out old clothes, but whose poverty-stricken appearance contrasted with his proud and haughty bearing. "Look there," said Game, calling the attention of the others. "Look at that samurai. Dirty and ragged as his coat is, how easy it is to see that he is of noble birth. Let us wardsmen dress ourselves up in never so fine clothes, we could not look as he does." "Aye," said Shirobai, "I wish we could make friends with him and ask him up here to drink a cup of wine with us. However, it would not be seemly for us wardsmen to go and invite a person of his condition." "We can easily get over that difficulty," said Banziaman. "As I am a samurai myself, there will be no impropriety in my going and saying a few civil words to him and bringing him in." The other two having joyfully accepted the offer, Banziaman ran downstairs and went up to the strange samurai and saluted him, saying, "I pray you to wait a moment, Sir Samurai. My name is Fuwa Banziaman, at your service. I am a rōnin, as I judge from your appearance that you are yourself." For a moment Banziaman was taken aback, but quickly recovering himself, he replied, "Ah, Sir Sansa, you may well be angry with me, but since I stole the Muramasa sword and fled to Yedo, I have known no peace. I have been haunted by remorse for my crime. I shall not resist your vengeance. Do with me as it shall seem best to you, or rather take my life, and let there be an end of this quarrel." "Nay," answered Sansa, "to kill a man who repents him of his sins is a base and ignoble action. When you stole from me the Muramasa blade, which had been confided to my care by my lord, I became a disgraced and ruined man. Give me back that sword, that I may lay it before my lord, and I will spare your life. I seek to slay no man needlessly. Sir Sansa, I thank you for your mercy. At this moment I have not the sword by me, but if you will go into yonder tea house and wait a while, I will fetch it and deliver it into your hands." Sansa having consented to this, the two men entered the tea house, where Banziaman's two companions were waiting for them. Banziaman and the two men pressed the wine, cup upon Sansa so often that the fumes gradually got into his head, and he fell asleep. The two wardsmen, seeing this, went out for a walk, and Banziaman, left alone with the sleeping man, began to revolve fresh plots against him in his mind. On a sudden, a thought struck him. Noiselessly seizing Sansa's sword, which he had laid aside on entering the room, he stole softly downstairs with it, and carrying it into the backyard, pounded and blunted its edge with a stone, and having made it useless as a weapon, he replaced it in its scabbard, and running upstairs again laid it in its place without disturbing Sansa, who, little suspecting treachery, lay sleeping off the effects of the wine. At last, however, he awoke, and ashamed at having been overcome by drink, he said to Banziaman, "Come, Banziaman, we have dallied too long. Give me the Muramasa sword and let me go." "Of course," replied the other sneeringly. "I am longing to give it back to you, but unfortunately in my poverty I have been obliged to pawn it for 50 ounces of silver. If you have so much money about you, give it to me and I will return the sword to you." "Wretch!" cried Sansa, seeing that Banziaman was trying to fool him. "Have I not had enough of your vile tricks? At any rate, if I cannot get back the sword, Your head shall be laid before my lord in its place." "Come," added he, stamping his foot impatiently, "defend yourself. With all my heart. But not here in this tea house. Let us go to the mound and fight it out." "Agreed. There is no need for us to bring trouble on the landlord. Come to the mound of the Yashiwara." So they went to the mound, and drawing their swords, began to fight furiously. As the news soon spread abroad through the Yashiwara that a duel was being fought upon the mound, the people flocked out to see the sight, and among them came Tokengame and Shirobai, Banziemen companions, who, when they saw that the combatants were their own friend and the strange samurai, tried to interfere and stop the fight, but being hindered by the thickness of the crowd, remained as spectators. The two men fought desperately, each driven by fierce rage against the other. But Sansa, who was by far the better fencer of the two, once, twice, and again dealt blows which should have cut Banziemen down, and yet no blood came forth. Sansa, astonished at this, put forth all his strength and fought so skillfully that all the bystanders applauded him, and Banziemen, though he knew his adversary's sword to be blunted, was so terrified that he stumbled and fell. Sansa, brave soldier that he was, scorned to strike a fallen foe and bade him rise and fight again. So they engaged again, and Sansa, who from the beginning had had the advantage, slipped and fell in his turn. Banziemen, forgetting the mercy which had been shown to him, rushed up, with bloodthirsty joy glaring in his eyes, and stabbed Sansa in the side as he lay on the ground. Faint as he was, he could not lift his hand to save himself, and his craven foe was about to strike him again, when the bystanders all cried shame upon his baseness. Then Game and Shirobai lifted up their voices and said, "Hold, coward! Have you forgotten how your own life was spared but a moment since? Beast of a samurai, we have been your friends hitherto, but now behold in us the avengers of this brave man." With these words, the two men drew their dirks, and the spectators fell back as they rushed in upon Banziemen, who, terror, stricken by their fierce looks and words, fled without having dealt the death blow to Sansa. They tried to pursue him, but he made good his escape, so the two men returned to help the wounded man. When he came to himself by dint of their kind treatment, they spoke to him and comforted him, and asked him what province he came from, that they might write to his friends and tell them what had befallen him. Sansa, in a voice faint from pain and loss of blood, told them his name and the story of the stolen sword, and of his enmity against Banziemen. "But," said he, "just now when I was fighting, I struck Banziemen more than once, and without effect. How could that have been?" Then they looked at his sword, which had fallen by his side, and saw that the edge was all broken away. More than ever they felt indignant at the baseness of Banziemen heart, and redoubled their kindness to Sansa. But in spite of all their efforts, he grew weaker and weaker, until at last his breathing ceased altogether. So they buried the corpse honorably in an adjoining temple, and wrote to Sansa's wife and son, describing to them the manner of his death. Now when Sansa's wife, who had long been anxiously expecting her husband return, opened the letter and learned the cruel circumstances of his death, she and her son Cassandra mourned bitterly over his loss. Then Cassandra, who was now 14 years old, said to his mother, "Take comfort, mother, for I will go to Yedo and seek out this Banziemen, my father murderer, and I will surely avenge his death. Now, therefore, make ready all that I need for this journey." And as they were consulting over the manner of their revenge, Yumanasuke, the son of Yumanojo, whom Sansa had slain, having heard of the death of his father enemy, came to the house. But he came with no hostile intent. True, Sansa had killed his father, but the widow and the orphan were guiltless, and he bore them no ill will. On the contrary, he felt that Banziemen was their common enemy. It was he who, by his evil deeds, had been the cause of all the mischief that had arisen, and now again, by murdering Sansa, he had robbed Yumanasuke of his revenge. In this spirit he said to Cassandra, "Sir Cassandra, I hear that your father has been cruelly murdered by Banziemen at Yedo." I know that you will avenge the death of your father, as the son of a soldier should. If, therefore, you will accept my poor services, I will be your second, and will help you to the best of my ability. Banzayémon shall be my enemy, as he is yours. Nay, Sir Yumanasuke, although I thank you from my heart, I cannot accept this favor at your hands. My father Sanza slew your noble father. That you should requite this misfortune thus is more than kind, but I cannot think of suffering you to risk your life on my behalf. Listen to me, replied Yumanasuke, smiling, and you will think it less strange that I should offer to help you. Last year, when my father lay a bleeding corpse on the seashore, your father made a covenant with me that he would return to give me my revenge, so soon as he should have regained the stolen sword. Banzayémon, by murdering him on the mound of the Yashiwara, has thwarted me in this. And now upon whom can I avenge my father's death but upon him whose baseness was indeed its cause? Now, therefore, I am determined to go with you to Yedo, and not before the murders of our two fathers shall have been fully atoned for will we return to our own country. When Kasanza heard this generous speech, he could not conceal his admiration, and the widow, prostrating herself at Yumanasuke's feet, shed tears of gratitude. The two youths, having agreed to stand by one another, made all ready for their journey, and obtained leave from their prince to go in search of the traitor Banzayémon. They reached Yedo without meeting with any adventures, and taking up their abode at a cheap inn began to make their inquiries. But, although they sought far and wide, they could learn no tidings of their enemy. When 3 months had passed thus, Kasanza began to grow faint-hearted at their repeated failures, but Yumanasuke supported and comforted him, urging him to fresh efforts. But soon a great misfortune befell them. Kasanza fell sick with ophthalmia, and neither the tender nursing of his friend, nor the drugs and doctors upon whom Yumanasuke spent all their money, had any effect on the suffering boy, who soon became stone blind. Friendless and penniless, the one deprived of his eyesight and only a clog upon the other, the two youths were thrown upon their own resources. Then Yumanasuke, reduced to the last extremity of distress, was forced to lead out Kasanza to a sakusa to beg sitting by the roadside, whilst he himself, wandering hither and thither, picked up what he could from the charity of those who saw his wretched plight. But all this while he never lost sight of his revenge, and almost thanked the chance which had made him a beggar, for the opportunity which it gave him of hunting out strange and hidden haunts of vagabond life, into which in his more prosperous condition he could not have penetrated. So he walked to and fro through the city, leaning on a stout staff, in which he had hidden his sword, waiting patiently for fortune to bring him face to face with Banzayémon. So he entered a company of mountebanks, and earned his living by showing tricks of swordsmanship, and selling tooth powder at the Okayama at a sakusa. One day, as he was going towards a sakusa to ply his trade, he caught sight of a blind beggar, in whom, in spite of his poverty, stricken and altered appearance, he recognized the son of his enemy. Rightly he judged that, in spite of the boy's apparently helpless condition, the discovery boded no weal for him. So mounting to the upper story of a tea house hard by, he watched to see who should come to Kasanza's assistance. Nor had he to wait long, for presently he saw a second beggar come up and speak words of encouragement and kindness to the blind youth, and looking attentively, he saw that the new comer was Yumanasuke. Having thus discovered who was on his track, he went home and sought means of killing the two beggars. So he lay in wait and traced them to the poor hut where they dwelt, and one night, when he knew Yumanasuke to be absent, he crept in. Kasanza, being blind, thought that the footsteps were those of Yumanasuke, and jumped up to welcome him. But he, in his heartless cruelty, which not even the boy's piteous state could move, slew Kasanza as he helplessly stretched out his hands to feel for his friend. The deed was yet unfinished when Yumanasuke returned, and hearing a scuffle inside the hut, drew the sword which was hidden in his staff and rushed in. But Banzayémon, profiting by the darkness, eluded him and fled from the hut. Yumanasuke followed swiftly after him, but just as he was on the point of catching him, Banziemon, making a sweep backwards with his drawn sword, wounded Yumanasuke in the thigh, so that he stumbled and fell, and the murderer, swift of foot, made good his escape. The wounded youth tried to pursue him again, but being compelled by the pain of his wound to desist, returned home and found his blind companion lying dead, weltering in his own blood. Cursing his unhappy fate, he called in the beggars of the fraternity to which he belonged, and between them they buried Casanza, and he himself being too poor to procure a surgeon aid or to buy healing medicaments for his wound, became a cripple. It was at this time that Shurai Gunpachi, who was living under the protection of Chobai, the father of the Otokodate, was in love with Kamurasaki, the beautiful courtesan who lived at the sign of the 3 sea shores in the Yashiwara. He had long exhausted the scanty supplies which he possessed, and was now in the habit of feeding his purse by murder and robbery, that he might have means to pursue his wild and extravagant life. One night, when he was out on his cutthroat business, his fellows, who had long suspected that he was after no good, sent one of their number, named Seibei, to watch him. Gunpachi, little dreaming that anyone was following him, swaggered along the street until he fell in with a wardsman, whom he cut down and robbed. But the booty proving small, he waited for a second chance, and, seeing a light moving in the distance, hid himself in the shadow of a large tub for catching rain, water till the bearer of the lantern should come up. When the man drew near, Gunpachi saw that he was dressed as a traveler and wore a long dirk. So he sprung out from his lurking place and made to kill him. But the traveler nimbly jumped on one side and proved no mean adversary, for he drew his dirk and fought stoutly for his life. However, he was no match for so skillful a swordsman as Gunpachi, who, after a sharp struggle, dispatched him and carried off his purse, which contained 200 ryos. Overjoyed at having found so rich a prize, Gunpachi was making off for the Yashiwara, when Seibei, who, horror stricken, had seen both murders, came up and began to upbraid him for his wickedness. But Gunpachi was so smooth-spoken and so well-liked by his comrades that he easily persuaded Seibei to hush the matter up and accompany him to the Yashiwara for a little diversion. As they were talking by the way, Seibei said to Gunpachi, "I bought a new dirk the other day, but I have not had an opportunity to try it yet. You have had so much experience in swords that you ought to be a good judge. Pray look at this dirk and tell me whether you think it good for anything." "We will soon see what sort of metal it is made of," answered Gunpachi. "We will just try it on the first beggar we come across." At first Seibei was horrified by this cruel proposal, but by degrees he yielded to his companion persuasions, and so they went on their way until Seibei spied out a crippled beggar lying asleep on the bank outside the Yashiwara. The sound of their footsteps aroused the beggar, who, seeing a samurai and a wardsman pointing at him, and evidently speaking about him, thought that their consultation could bode him no good. So he pretended to be still asleep, watching them carefully all the while, and when Seibei went up to him, brandishing his dirk, the beggar, avoiding the blow, seized Seibei's arm and, twisting it round, flung him into the ditch below. Gunpachi, seeing his companion discomfiture, attacked the beggar, who, drawing a sword from his staff, made such lightning, swift passes that, crippled though he was, and unable to move his legs freely, Gunpachi could not overpower him. And although Seibei crawled out of the ditch and came to his assistance, the beggar, nothing daunted, dealt his blows about him to such good purpose that he wounded Seibei in the temple and arm. Then Gunpachi, reflecting that after all he had no quarrel with the beggar, and that he had better attend to Seibei wounds than go on fighting to no purpose, drew Seibei away, leaving the beggar, who was too lame to follow them, in peace. When he examined Seibei wounds, he found that they were so severe that they must give up their night frolic and go home. So they went back to the house of Chobai, the father of the Otokodate, and Seibei, afraid to show himself with his sword cuts, feigned sickness and went to bed. On the following morning, Chobai, happening to need his apprentice Seibei's services, sent for him and was told that he was sick. So he went to the room where he lay abed and to his astonishment saw the cut upon his temple. At first, the wounded man refused to answer any questions as to how he had been hurt, but at last, on being pressed by Chobai, he told the whole story of what had taken place the night before. When Chobai heard the tale, he guessed that the valiant beggar must be some noble samurai in disguise, who, having a wrong to avenge, was biding his time to meet with his enemy. And wishing to help so brave a man, he went in the evening with his 2 faithful apprentices, Tokengame and Shirobai, the loose colt, to the bank outside the Yashiwara to seek out the beggar. The latter, not one whit frightened by the adventure of the previous night, had taken his place as usual and was lying on the bank when Chobai came up to him and said, "Sir, I am Chobai, the chief of the Otokodate, at your service. I have learnt with deep regret that 2 of my men insulted and attacked you last night. However, happily, even Gunpachi, famous swordsman though he be, was no match for you and had to beat a retreat before you. I know, therefore, that you must be a noble samurai, who by some ill chance have become a cripple and a beggar. Now, therefore, I pray you tell me all your story, for humble wardsman as I am, I may be able to assist you if you will condescend to allow me." The cripple at first tried to shun Chobai questions, but at last, touched by the honesty and kindness of his speech, he replied, "Sir, my name is Takagi Yumanasuke, and I am a native of Yamato." And then he went on to narrate all the misfortunes which the wickedness of Banzyemon had brought about. "This is indeed a strange story," said Chobai, who had listened with indignation. "This Banzyemon, before I knew the blackness of his heart, was once under my protection. But after he murdered Sansa, hard by here, he was pursued by these 2 apprentices of mine, and since that day he has been no more to my house." When he had introduced the 2 apprentices to Yumanasuke, Chobai pulled forth a suit of silk clothes befitting a gentleman, and having made the crippled youth lay aside his beggar raiment, led him to a bath, and had his hair dressed. Then he bade Tokengame lodge him and take charge of him, and having sent for a famous physician, caused Yumanasuke to undergo careful treatment for the wound in his thigh. In the course of 2 months, the pain had almost disappeared, so that he could stand easily. And when, after another month, he could walk about a little, Chobai removed him to his own house, pretending to his wife and apprentices that he was one of his own relations who had come on a visit to him. After a while, when Yumanasuke had become quite cured, he went one day to worship at a famous temple, and on his way home after dark, he was overtaken by a shower of rain and took shelter under the eaves of a house in a part of the city called Yanajiwara, waiting for the sky to clear. Now it happened that this same night Gunpachi had gone out on one of his bloody expeditions, to which his poverty and his love for Kamurasaki drove him in spite of himself. And, seeing a samurai standing in the gloom, he sprang upon him before he had recognized Yumanasuke, whom he knew as a friend of his patron Chobai. Yumanasuke drew and defended himself, and soon contrived to slash Gunpachi on the forehead, so that the latter, seeing himself overmatched, fled under the cover of the night. Yumanasuke, fearing to hurt his recently healed wound, did not give chase and went quietly back to Chobai House. When Gunpachi returned home, he hatched a story to deceive Chobai as to the cause of the wound on his forehead. Chobai, however, having overheard Yumanasuke reproving Gunpachi for his wickedness, soon became aware of the truth, and not caring to keep a robber and murderer near him, gave Gunpachi a present of money and bade him return to his house no more. And now Chobai, seeing that Yumanasuke had recovered his strength, divided his apprentices into bands to hunt out Banzyemon in order that the vendetta might be accomplished. It soon was reported to him that Banzyemon was earning his living among the mountebanks of Asakusa. So Chobai communicated this intelligence to Yumanasuke, who made his preparations accordingly. And on the following morning, the 2 went to Asakusa, where Banzyemon was astonishing a crowd of country boors by exhibiting tricks with his sword. Then Yumanasuke, striding through the gaping rabble, shouted out, "False, murderous coward, your day has come. I, Yumanasuke, the son of Yumanojo, have come to demand vengeance for the death of 3 innocent men who have perished by your treachery. If you are a man, defend yourself. This day shall your soul see hell." With these words, he rushed furiously upon Banziemon, who, seeing escape to be impossible, stood upon his guard. But his coward heart quailed before the avenger, and he soon lay bleeding at his enemy's feet. But who shall say how Yumanasuke thanked Chobai for his assistance, or how, when he had returned to his own country, he treasured up his gratitude in his heart, looking upon Chobai as more than a second father. Thus did Chobai use his power to punish the wicked, and to reward the good giving of his abundance to the poor, and succoring the unfortunate, so that his name was honored far and near. It remains only to record the tragical manner of his death. We have already told how my lord Midzuno Jiuyémon, the chief of the associated nobles, had been foiled in his attempts to bring shame upon Chobai, the father of the Otokodate, and how, on the contrary, the latter, by his ready wit, never failed to make the proud, noble weapons recoil upon him. The failure of these attempts rankled in the breast of Jiuyémon, who hated Chobai with an intense hatred and sought to be revenged upon him. One day, he sent a retainer to Chobai House with a message to the effect that on the following day my lord Jiuyémon would be glad to see Chobai at his house, and to offer him a cup of wine, in return for the cold macaroni with which his lordship had been feasted some time since. Chobai immediately suspected that in sending this friendly summons, the cunning noble was hiding a dagger in a smile. However, he knew that if he stayed away out of fear, he would be branded as a coward, and made a laughing stock for fools to jeer at. Not caring that Jiuyémon should succeed in his desire to put him to shame, he sent for his favorite apprentice, Tokengame, and said to him, "I have been invited to a drinking bout by Midzuno Jiuyémon. I know full well that this is but a stratagem to requite me for having fooled him, and maybe his hatred will go the length of killing me. However, I shall go and take my chance, and if I detect any sign of foul play, I will try to serve the world by ridding it of a tyrant, who passes his life in oppressing the helpless farmers and wardsmen. Now, as even if I succeed in killing him in his own house, my life must pay forfeit for the deed. Do you come to morrow night with a burying tub and fetch my corpse from this Jiuyémon house?" Tokengame, when he heard the father speak thus, was horrified and tried to dissuade him from obeying the invitation. But Chobai's mind was fixed, and without heeding Game's remonstrances, he proceeded to give instructions as to the disposal of his property after his death, and to settle all his earthly affairs. On the following day, towards noon, he made ready to go to Jiuyémon house, bidding one of his apprentices precede him with a complimentary present. Jiuyémon, who was waiting with impatience for Chobai to come, so soon as he heard of his arrival, ordered his retainers to usher him into his presence. And Chobai, having bade his apprentices without fail to come and fetch him that night, went into the house. No sooner had he reached the room next to that in which Jiuyémon was sitting than he saw that his suspicions of treachery were well founded. For 2 men with drawn swords rushed upon him and tried to cut him down. Deftly avoiding their blows, however, he tripped up the one, and kicking the other in the ribs, sent him reeling and breathless against the wall. Then, as calmly as if nothing had happened, he presented himself before Jiuyémon, who, peeping through a chink in the sliding doors, had watched his retainer's failure. "Welcome, welcome, Master Chobai," said he. "I always had heard that you were a man of metal, and I wanted to see what stuff you were made of. So I bade my retainers put your courage to the test." "That was a masterly throw of yours." "Well, you must excuse this churlish reception. Come and sit down by me." "Pray do not mention it, my lord," said Chobai, smiling rather scornfully. "I know that my poor skill is not to be measured with that of a noble samurai, and if these 2 good gentlemen had the worst of it just now, it was mere luck, that is all." So, after the usual compliments had been exchanged, Chobai sat down by Jiuyémon, and the attendants brought in wine and condiments. Before they began to drink, however, Jiuyémon said. "You must be tired and exhausted with your walk this hot day, Master Chobai. I thought that perhaps a bath might refresh you, so I ordered my men to get it ready for you. Would you not like to bathe and make yourself comfortable?" Chobai suspected that this was a trick to strip him and take him unawares when he should have laid aside his dirk. However, he answered cheerfully, "Your lordship is very good. I shall be glad to avail myself of your kind offer. Pray excuse me for a few moments." So he went to the bathroom, and leaving his clothes outside, he got into the bath with the full conviction that it would be the place of his death. Yet he never trembled nor quailed, determined that, if he needs must die, no man should say he had been a coward. Then Jiuyémon, calling to his attendants, said, "Quick, lock the door of the bathroom. We hold him fast now. If he gets out, more than one life will pay the price of his. He is a match for any 6 of you in fair fight. Lock the door, I say, and light up the fire under the bath, and we will boil him to death and be rid of him. Quick, men, quick." So they locked the door and fed the fire until the water hissed and bubbled within, and Chobai, in his agony, tried to burst open the door, but Jiuyémon ordered his men to thrust their spears through the partition wall and dispatch him. 2 of the spears Chobai clutched and broke short off, but at last he was struck by a mortal blow under the ribs and died a brave man by the hands of cowards. When the retainers heard this, they marveled at the courage of Chobai, who had thus wittingly come to meet his fate. So Chobai's corpse was placed in the burying tub and handed over to his apprentices, who swore to avenge his death. Far and wide, the poor and friendless mourned for this good man. His son Chimatsu inherited his property, and his wife remained a faithful widow until her dying day, praying that she might sit with him in paradise upon the cup of the same lotus flower. Many a time did the apprentices of Chobai meet together to avenge him, but Jiuyémon eluded all their efforts, until, having been imprisoned by the government in the temple called Kanieji at Yedo, as is related in the story of Kazuma Revenge, he was placed beyond the reach of their hatred. So lived and so died Chobai of Banzuin, the father of the Otokodate of Yedo. Mitford, Tales of Old Japan, Chapter 5, The Wonderful Adventures of Funakoshi Jiuyémon. The doughty deeds and marvelous experiences of Funakoshi Jiuyémon are perhaps, like those of Robin Hood and his merry men, rather traditional than historical. But even if all or part of the deeds which popular belief ascribes to him be false, his story conveys a true picture of manners and customs. Above all, the manner of the vengeance which he wreaked upon the wife who had dishonored him, and upon her lover, shows the high importance which the Japanese attach to the sanctity of the marriage tie. The 50th and 51st chapters of the Legacy of Ieyasu, already quoted, say, "If a married woman of the agricultural, artisan, or commercial class shall secretly have intercourse with another man, it is not necessary for the husband to enter a complaint against the persons thus confusing the great relation of mankind, but he may put them both to death. Nevertheless, should he slay one of them and spare the other, his guilt is the same as that of the unrighteous persons. In the event, however, of advice being sought, the parties not having been slain accede to the wishes of the complainant with regard to putting them to death or not. Mankind, in whose bodies the male and female elements induce a natural desire towards the same object, do not look upon such practices with aversion, and the adjudication of such cases is a matter of special deliberation and consultation. Men and women of the military class are expected to know better than to occasion disturbance by violating existing regulations, and such an one breaking the regulations by lewd, trifling, or illicit intercourse shall at once be punished, without deliberation or consultation. It is not the same in this case as in that of agriculturists, artisans, and traders. As a criminal offense, adultery was, according to the ancient laws of Japan, punished by crucifixion. In more modern times, it has been punished by decapitation and the disgraceful exposure of the head after death. But if the murder of the injured husband accompany the crime of adultery, then the guilty parties are crucified to this day. At the present time, the husband is no longer allowed to take the law into his own hands. He must report the matter to the government and trust to the state to avenge his honor. Sacred as the marriage tie is so long as it lasts, the law which cuts it is curiously facile, or rather there is no law. A man may turn his wife out of doors, as it may suit his fancy. An example of this practice was shown in the story of the 47 rōnins. A husband has but to report the matter to his lord, and the ceremony of divorce is completed. Thus, in the days of the shogun's power, a Hatamoto who had divorced his wife reported the matter to the shogun. A daimyo retainer reports the matter to his prince. The facility of divorce, however, seems to be but rarely taken advantage of. This is probably owing to the practice of keeping concubines. It has often been asked, are the Japanese polygamists? The answer is yes and no. They marry but one wife, but a man may, according to his station and means, have one or more concubines in addition. The emperor has 12 concubines, called kasaki, and Ieyasu, alluding forcibly to excess in this respect as Tederima belli causa, laid down that the princes might have 8, high officers 5, and ordinary samurai 2 handmaids. In the olden times, he writes, the downfall of castles and the overthrow of kingdoms all proceeded from this alone. Why is not the indulgence of passions guarded against? The difference between the position of the wife and that of the concubine is marked. The legitimate wife is to the handmaid as a lord is to his vassal. And it frequently happens that a noble, having children by his concubines but none by his wife, selects a younger brother of his own, or even adopts the son of some relative to succeed him in the family honors. The family line is considered to be thus more purely preserved. The law of succession is, however, extremely lax. Excellent personal merits will sometimes secure to the left-handed son the inheritance of his ancestors, and it often occurs that the son of a concubine, who is debarred from succeeding to his own father, is adopted as the heir of a relation or friend of even higher rank. When the wife of a noble has a daughter but no son, the practice is to adopt a youth of suitable family and age, who marries the girl and inherits as a son. The principle of adoption is universal among all classes, from the emperor down to his meanest subject. Nor is the family line considered to have been broken because an adopted son has succeeded to the estates. Indeed, should a noble die without heir male, either begotten or adopted, his lands are forfeited to the state. It is a matter of care that the person adopted should be himself sprung from a stock of rank, suited to that of the family into which he is to be received. 16 and upwards being considered the marriageable age for a man, it is not usual for persons below that age to adopt an heir. Yet an infant at the point of death may adopt a person older than himself, that the family line may not become extinct. An account of the marriage ceremony will be found in the appendix upon the subject. In the olden time, in the island of Shikoku, there lived one Funakoshi Jiuyémon, a brave samurai and accomplished man who was in great favor with the prince, his master. One day, at a drinking bout, a quarrel sprung up between him and a brother, officer, which resulted in a duel upon the spot, in which Jiuyémon killed his adversary. When Jiuyémon awoke to a sense of what he had done, he was struck with remorse, and he thought to disembowel himself. But, receiving a private summons from his lord, he went to the castle, and the prince said to him, "So it seems that you have been getting drunk and quarreling, and that you have killed one of your friends, and now I suppose you will have determined to perform hara-kiri. It is a great pity, and in the face of the laws, I can do nothing for you openly." And with these words, the prince presented him with a fine sword, made by Suke Sada, and 100 ounces of silver, and having bade him farewell, entered his private apartments. and Jiuyémon, prostrating himself, wept tears of gratitude. Then, taking the sword and the money, he went home and prepared to fly from the province, and secretly took leave of his relations, each of whom made him some parting present. These gifts, together with his own money and what he had received from the prince, made up a sum of 250 ounces of silver, with which and his Tsukesada sword, he escaped under cover of darkness and went to a sea port called Marugame in the province of Sanoki, where he proposed to wait for an opportunity of setting sail for Osaka. As ill luck would have it, the wind being contrary, he had to remain 3 days idle. But at last the wind changed, so he went down to the beach, thinking that he should certainly find a junk about to sail. And as he was looking about him, a sailor came up and said, "If your honor is minded to take a trip to Osaka, my ship is bound thither, and I should be glad to take you with me as passenger." That is exactly what I wanted. "I will gladly take a passage," replied Jiuyémon, who was delighted at the chance. "Well then, we must set sail at once, so please come on board without delay." So Jiuyémon went with him and embarked, and as they left the harbor and struck into the open sea, the moon was just rising above the eastern hills, illumining the dark night like a noonday sun. And Jiuyémon, taking his place in the bows of the ship, stood wrapped in contemplation of the beauty of the scene. Now it happened that the captain of the ship, whose name was Akagoshi Jiuyémon, was a fierce pirate who, attracted by Jiuyémon's well-to-do appearance, had determined to decoy him on board, that he might murder and rob him. And while Jiuyémon was looking at the moon, the pirate and his companions were collected in the stern of the ship, taking counsel together in whispers as to how they might slay him. He, on the other hand, having for some time past fancied their conduct somewhat strange, bethought him that it was not prudent to lay aside his sword, so he went towards the place where he had been sitting, and had left his weapon lying to fetch it, when he was stopped by 3 of the pirates, who blocked up the gangway, saying, "Stop, Sir Samurai. Unluckily for you, this ship in which you have taken a passage belongs to the pirate Akagoshi Jiuyémon." And with that he cut at him, but Jiuyémon avoided the blow, and closing with the ruffian, got back his sword. 10 of the pirates then attacked him with spear and sword, but he, putting his back against the bows of the ship, showed such good fight that he killed 3 of his assailants, and the others stood off, not daring to approach him. Then the pirate captain, Akagoshi Jiuyémon, who had been watching the fighting from the stern, seeing that his men stood no chance against Jiuyémon's dexterity, and that he was only losing them to no purpose, thought to shoot him with a matchlock. Even Jiuyémon, brave as he was, lost heart when he saw the captain gun pointed at him, and tried to jump into the sea. But one of the pirates made a dash at him with a boat hook and caught him by the sleeve. Then Jiuyémon, in despair, took the fine Tsukesada sword which he had received from his prince, and throwing it at his captor, pierced him through the breast so that he fell dead, and himself plunging into the sea swam for his life. The pirate captain shot at him and missed him, and the rest of the crew made every endeavor to seize him with their boat hooks, that they might avenge the death of their mates. But it was all in vain, and Jiuyémon, having shaken off his clothes that he might swim the better, made good his escape. So the pirates threw the bodies of their dead comrades into the sea, and the captain was partly consoled for their loss by the possession of the Tsukesada sword, with which one of them had been transfixed. As soon as Jiuyémon jumped over the ship's side, being a good swimmer, he took a long dive, which carried him well out of danger and struck out vigorously. And although he was tired and distressed by his exertions, he braced himself up to greater energy and faced the waves boldly. At last, in the far distance, to his great joy, he spied a light for which he made, and found that it was a ship carrying lanterns marked with the badge of the governor of Osaka. So he hailed her, saying, "I have fallen into great trouble among pirates. Pray rescue me." "Who and what are you?" shouted an officer, some 40 years of age. "My name is Funakoshi Jiuyémon, and I have unwittingly fallen in with pirates this night. I have escaped so far. I pray you save me, lest I die." "Hold on to this and come up," replied the other, holding out the butt end of a spear to him, which he caught hold of and clambered up the ship's side. When the officer saw before him a handsome gentleman, Naked all but his loincloth, and with his hair all in disorder, he called to his servants to bring some of his own clothes, and having dressed him in them, said, "What clan do you belong to, sir?" "Sir, I am a rōnin and was on my way to Osaka, but the sailors of the ship on which I had embarked were pirates." And so he told the whole story of the fight and of his escape. "Well done, sir," replied the other, astonished at his prowess. "My name is Kazuma Jiuyémon, at your service. I am an officer attached to the governor of Osaka. Pray, have you any friends in that city?" "No, sir, I have no friends there. But as in 2 years I shall be able to return to my own country and re-enter my lord's service, I thought during that time to engage in trade and live as a common wardsman. Indeed, that is a poor prospect. However, if you will allow me, I will do all that is in my power to assist you. Pray excuse the liberty I am taking in making such a proposal." Jiuyémon warmly thanked Kazuma Jiuyémon for his kindness, and so they reached Osaka without further adventures. Jiuyémon, who had secreted in his girdle the 250 ounces which he had brought with him from home, bought a small house and started in trade as a vendor of perfumes, tooth, powder, combs, and other toilet articles. And Kazuma Jiuyémon, who treated him with great kindness and rendered him many services, prompted him, as he was a single man, to take to himself a wife. Acting upon this advice, he married a singing girl called Ohiyaku. Now this Ohiyaku, although at first she seemed very affectionately disposed towards Jiuyémon, had been, during the time that she was a singer, a woman of bad and profligate character. And at this time there was in Osaka a certain wrestler named Takasegawa Kurobai, a very handsome man with whom Ohiyaku fell desperately in love, so that at last, being by nature a passionate woman, she became unfaithful to Jiuyémon. The latter, little suspecting that anything was amiss, was in the habit of spending his evenings at the house of his patron Kazuma Jiuyémon, whose son, a youth of 18, named Tanishin, conceived a great friendship for Jiuyémon, and used constantly to invite him to play a game at checkers. And it was on these occasions that Ohiyaku, profiting by her husband's absence, used to arrange her meetings with the wrestler Takasegawa. One evening, when Jiuyémon, as was his wont, had gone out to play at checkers with Kazuma Tanishin, Ohiyaku took advantage of the occasion to go and fetch the wrestler and invite him to a little feast. And as they were enjoying themselves over their wine, Ohiyaku said to him, "Ah, Master Takasegawa, how wonderfully chance favors us, and how pleasant these stolen interviews are. How much nicer still it would be if we could only be married. But as long as Jiuyémon is in the way, it is impossible, and that is my one cause of distress. It is no use being in such a hurry. If you only have patience, we shall be able to marry, sure enough. What you have got to look out for now is that Jiuyémon does not find out what we are about. I suppose there is no chance of his coming home tonight, is there? Oh dear, no. You need not be afraid. He is gone to Kazuma House to play checkers, so he is sure to spend the night there." And so the guilty couple went on gossiping, with their minds at ease, until at last they dropped off asleep. In the meanwhile, Jiuyémon, in the middle of his game at checkers, was seized with a sudden pain in his stomach, and said to Kazuma Tanishin, "Young sir, I feel an unaccountable pain in my stomach. I think I had better go home before it gets worse. That is a bad job. Wait a little and I will give you some physic, but at any rate you had better spend the night here." "Many thanks for your kindness," replied Jiuyémon, "but I had rather go home." So he took his leave and went off to his own house, bearing the pain as best he might. When he arrived in front of his own door, he tried to open it, but the lock was fastened, and he could not get in, so he rapped violently at the shutters to try and awaken his wife. When Ohiyaku heard the noise, she woke with a start and roused the wrestler, saying to him in a whisper, "Get up, get up. Jiuyémon has come back. You must hide as fast as possible." Oh dear, said the wrestler in a great fright. "Here a pretty mess. Where on earth shall I hide myself?" And he stumbled about in every direction looking for a hiding place, but found none. Jiuyémon, seeing that his wife did not come to open the door, got impatient at last and forced it open by unfixing the sliding shutter and, entering the house, found himself face to face with his wife and her lover, who were both in such confusion that they did not know what to do. Jiuyémon, however, took no notice of them, but lit his pipe and sat smoking and watching them in silence. At last, the wrestler, Takasegawa, broke the silence by saying, "I thought, sir, that I should be sure to have the pleasure of finding you at home this evening, so I came out to call upon you. When I got here, the Lady O Hyaku was so kind as to offer me some wine, and I drank a little more than was good for me, so that it got into my head, and I fell asleep. I must really apologize for having taken such a liberty in your absence, but indeed, although appearances are against us, there has been nothing wrong." "Certainly," said O Hyaku, coming to her lover's support, "Master Takasegawa is not at all to blame. It was I who invited him to drink wine, so I hope you will excuse him." Jiuyémon sat pondering the matter over in his mind for a moment, and then said to the wrestler, "You say that you are innocent, but of course that is a lie. It is no use trying to conceal your fault. However, next year I shall, in all probability, return to my own country, and then you may take O Hyaku and do what you will with her. Far be it from me to care what becomes of a woman with such a stinking heart." When the wrestler and O Hyaku heard Jiuyémon say this quite quietly, they could not speak, but held their peace for very shame. "Here, you Takasegawa," pursued he, "you may stop here tonight if you like it and go home tomorrow." "Thank you, sir," replied the wrestler. "I am much obliged to you, but the fact is that I have some pressing business in another part of the town, so, with your permission, I will take my leave." And so he went out, covered with confusion. As for the faithless wife, O Hyaku, she was in great agitation, expecting to be severely reprimanded at least. But Jiuyémon took no notice of her, and showed no anger. Only from that day forth, although she remained in his house as his wife, he separated himself from her entirely. Matters went on in this way for some time, until at last, one fine day, O Hyaku, looking out of doors, saw the wrestler Takasegawa passing in the street, so she called out to him, "Dear me, Master Takasegawa, can that be you? What a long time it is since we have met. Pray come in and have a chat. Thank you, I am much obliged to you, but as I do not like the sort of scene we had the other day, I think I had rather not accept your invitation. Pray do not talk in such a cowardly manner. Next year, when Jiuyémon goes back to his own country, he is sure to give me this house, and then you and I can marry and live as happily as possible. I do not like being in too great a hurry to accept fair offers. Nonsense. There is no need for showing such delicacy about accepting what is given you." And as she spoke, she caught the wrestler by the hand and led him into the house. After they had talked together for some time, she said, "Listen to me, Master Takasegawa. I have been thinking over all this for some time, and I see no help for it but to kill Jiuyémon and make an end of him. What do you want to do that for? As long as he is alive, we cannot be married. What I propose is that you should buy some poison, and I will put it secretly into his food. When he is dead, we can be happy to our heart's content." At first, Takasegawa was startled and bewildered by the audacity of their scheme, but forgetting the gratitude which he owed to Jiuyémon for sparing his life on the previous occasion, he replied, "Well, I think it can be managed. I have a friend who is a physician, so I will get him to compound some poison for me, and will send it to you. You must look out for a moment when your husband is not on his guard, and get him to take it." Having agreed upon this, Takasegawa went away, and having employed a physician to make up the poison, sent it to O Hyaku in a letter, suggesting that the poison should be mixed up with a sort of macaroni, of which Jiuyémon was very fond. Having read the letter, she put it carefully away in a drawer of her cupboard, and waited until Jiuyémon should express a wish to eat some macaroni. One day, towards the time of the new year, when O Hyaku had gone out to a party with a few of her friends, it happened that Jiuyémon, being alone in the house, was in want of some little thing. and failing to find it anywhere, at last bethought himself to look for it in Hyaku cupboard. And as he was searching amongst the odds and ends which it contained, he came upon the fatal letter. When he read the scheme for putting poison in his macaroni, he was taken aback and said to himself, "When I caught those two beasts in their wickedness, I spared them, because their blood would have defiled my sword, and now they are not even grateful for my mercy. Their crime is beyond all power of language to express, and I will kill them together." So he put back the letter in its place and waited for his wife to come home. So soon as she made her appearance, he said, "You have come home early, O Hyaku. I feel very dull and lonely this evening. Let us have a little wine." And as he spoke without any semblance of anger, it never entered O Hyaku's mind that he had seen the letter, so she went about her household duties with a quiet mind. The following evening, as Jiuyémon was sitting in his shop casting up his accounts with his counting board in his hand, Takasegawa passed by, and Jiuyémon called out to him, saying, "Well met, Takasegawa. I was just thinking of drinking a cup of wine tonight, but I have no one to keep me company, and it is dull work drinking alone. Pray come in and drink a bout with me." "Thank you, sir, I shall have much pleasure," replied the wrestler, who little expected what the other was aiming at, and so he went in and they began to drink and feast. "It is very cold tonight," said Jiuyémon after a while. "Suppose we warm up a little macaroni and eat it nice and hot. Perhaps, however, you do not like it. Indeed, I am very fond of it on the contrary. That is well. O Hyaku, please go and buy a little for us." "Directly," replied his wife, who hurried off to buy the paste, delighted at the opportunity for carrying out her murderous design upon her husband. As soon as she had prepared it, she poured it into bowls and set it before the two men, but into her husband's bowl only she put poison. Jiuyémon, who well knew what she had done, did not eat the mess at once, but remained talking about this, that, and the other, and the wrestler, out of politeness, was obliged to wait also. All of a sudden, Jiuyémon cried out, "Dear me, whilst we have been gossiping, the macaroni has been getting cold. Let us put it all together and warm it up again. As no one has put his lips to his bowl yet, it will all be clean, so none need be wasted." And with these words, he took the macaroni that was in the 3 bowls, and, pouring it all together into an iron pot, boiled it up again. This time Jiuyémon served out the food himself, and setting it before his wife and the wrestler, said, "There, make haste and eat it up before it gets cold." Jiuyémon, of course, did not eat any of the mess, and the would be murderers, knowing that sufficient poison had been originally put into Jiuyémon's bowl to kill them all 3, and that now the macaroni, having been well mixed up, would all be poisoned, were quite taken aback, and did not know what to do. "Come, make haste, or it will be quite cold. You said you liked it, so I sent to buy it on purpose. O Hyaku, come and make a hearty meal. I will eat some presently." At this, the pair looked very foolish and knew not what to answer. At last, the wrestler got up and said, "I do not feel quite well. I must beg to take my leave, and if you will allow me, I will come and accept your hospitality tomorrow instead. Dear me, I am sorry to hear you are not well. However, O Hyaku, there will be all the more macaroni for you." As for O Hyaku, she put a bold face upon the matter, and replied that she had supped already and had no appetite for any more. Then Jiuyémon, looking at them both with a scornful smile, said, "It seems that you, neither of you, care to eat this macaroni. However, as you, Takasegawa, are unwell, I will give you some excellent medicine." And going to the cupboard, he drew out the letter and laid it before the wrestler. When O Hyaku and the wrestler saw that their wicked schemes had been brought to light, they were struck dumb with shame. Takasegawa, seeing that denial was useless, drew his dirk and cut at Jiuyémon. But he, being nimble and quick, dived under the wrestler's arm and, seizing his right hand from behind, tightened his grasp upon it until it became numbed, and the dirk fell to the ground. For powerful man as the wrestler was, he was no match for Jiuyémon, who held him in so fast a grip that he could not move. Then Jiuyémon took the dirk which had fallen to the ground and said, "Oh, I thought that you, being a wrestler, would at least be a strong man, and that there would be some pleasure in fighting you. But I see that you are but a poor feckless creature, after all. It would have defiled my sword to have killed such an ungrateful hound with it, but luckily here is your own dirk, and I will slay you with that." Takasegawa struggled to escape, but in vain, and Ohiyaku, seizing a large kitchen knife, attacked Jiuyémon. But he, furious, kicked her in the loins so violently that she fell powerless. Then, brandishing the dirk, he cleft the wrestler from the shoulder down to the nipple of his breast, and the big man fell in his agony. Ohiyaku, seeing this, tried to fly, but Jiuyémon, seizing her by the hair of the head, stabbed her in the bosom, and placing her by her lover's side, gave her the death blow. On the following day, he sent in a report of what he had done to the governor of Osaka and buried the corpses. And from that time forth, he remained a single man and pursued his trade as a seller of perfumery and such like wares. And his leisure hours he continued to spend as before at the house of his patron, Kajiki Taziemon. One day, when Jiuyémon went to call upon Kajiki Taziemon, he was told by the servant, maid who met him at the door, that her master was out, but that her young master, Tanishin, was at home. So, saying that he would go in and pay his respects to the young gentleman, he entered the house. And as he suddenly pushed open the sliding door of the room in which Tanishin was sitting, the latter gave a great start, and his face turned pale and ghastly. "How now, young sir?" said Jiuyémon, laughing at him. "Surely you are not such a coward as to be afraid because the sliding doors are opened. That is not the way in which a brave samurai should behave." "Really, I am quite ashamed of myself," replied the other, blushing at the reproof. "But the fact is that I had some reason for being startled. Listen to me, Sir Jiuyémon, and I will tell you all about it. And further that, as a proof of his having gone, he should write his name upon a pillar in the shrine." All the rest agreed that this would be very good sport. So I, not liking to appear a coward, consented to take my chance with the rest, and as ill luck would have it, the lot fell upon me. I was thinking over this as you came in, and so it was that when you suddenly opened the door, I could not help giving a start. "If you only think for a moment," said Jiuyémon, "you will see that there is nothing to fear. How can beasts and hobgoblins exercise any power over men? However, do not let the matter trouble you. I will go in your place tonight and see if I cannot get the better of these goblins, if any there be, having done which, I will write your name upon the pillar so that everybody may think that you have been there." "Oh, thank you. That will indeed be a service. You can dress yourself up in my clothes, and nobody will be the wiser. I shall be truly grateful to you." So Jiuyémon, having gladly undertaken the job, as soon as the night set in made his preparations, and went to the place indicated an uncanny, looking, tumble, down lonely old shrine, all overgrown with moss and rank vegetation. However, Jiuyémon, who was afraid of nothing, cared little for the appearance of the place, and having made himself as comfortable as he could in so dreary a spot, sat down on the floor, lit his pipe, and kept a sharp look out for the goblins. He had not been waiting long before he saw a movement among the bushes, and presently he was surrounded by a host of elfish-looking creatures of all shapes and kinds, who came and made hideous faces at him. Jiuyémon quietly knocked the ashes out of his pipe, and then, jumping up, kicked over first one and then another of the elves, until several of them lay sprawling in the grass, and the rest made off, greatly astonished at this unexpected reception. When Jiuyémon took his lantern and examined the fallen goblins attentively, he saw that they were all Tanishin fellow students, who had painted their faces and made themselves hideous to frighten their companion, whom they knew to be a coward. All they got for their pains, however, was a good kicking from Jiuyémon, who left them groaning over their sore bones, and went home chuckling to himself at the result of the adventure. The fame of this exploit soon became noised about Osaka, so that all men praised Jiuyémon's courage, and shortly after this he was elected chief of the Otokodate, or Friendly Society of the Wardsmen, and busied himself no longer with his trade, but lived on the contributions of his numerous apprentices. Now Kajiki Tanishin was in love with a singing girl named Kashiku, upon whom he was in the habit of spending a great deal of money. She, however, cared nothing for him, for she had a sweetheart named Hikarobai, whom she used to contrive to meet secretly, although, in order to support her parents, she was forced to become the mistress of Tanishin. One evening, when the latter was on guard at the office of his chief, the governor of Osaka, Kashiku sent word privately to Hikarobai, summoning him to go to her house, as the coast would be clear. While the two were making merry over a little feast, Tanishin, who had persuaded a friend to take his duty for him on the plea of urgent business, knocked at the door, and Kashiku, in a great fright, hid her lover in a long clothes box and went to let in Tanishin, who, on entering the room and seeing the litter of the supper lying about, looked more closely and perceived a man's sandals, on which, by the light of a candle, he saw the figure 7. All this while Tanishin was looking for the hidden lover, but, as he could not see him, he made up his mind that Kashiku must have let him out by the back door. So he secreted one of the sandals in his sleeve as evidence, and without seeming to suspect anything, said, "Well, I shall be very busy this evening, so I must go home. Oh, will not you stay a little while? It is very dull here, when I am all alone without you. Pray stop and keep me company." But Tanishin made no reply and went home. Then Kashiku saw that one of the sandals was missing and felt certain that he must have carried it off as proof. So she went in great trouble to open the lid of the box and let out Hikarobai. When the two lovers talked over the matter, they agreed that, as they both were really in love, let Tanishin kill them if he would, they would gladly die together. They would enjoy the present. Let the future take care of itself. The following morning, Kashiku sent a messenger to Tanishin to implore his pardon, and he, being infatuated by the girl charms, forgave her and sent a present of 30 ounces of silver to her lover, Hikarobai, on the condition that he was never to see her again. But in spite of this, Kashiku and Hikarobai still continued their secret meetings. Acting upon this resolution, he went to call upon Jiuyémon and said to him, "Sir Jiuyémon, I have a favor to ask of you in connection with that girl Kashiku, whom you know all about. You are aware that I paid 30 ounces of silver to her lover Hikarobai to induce him to give up going to her house. But in spite of this, I cannot help suspecting that they still meet one another. It seems that this Hikarobai has an elder brother, one Chobai. Now, if you would go to this man and tell him to reprove his brother for his conduct, you would be doing me a great service." Replied Chobai, who felt bound to be more than usually civil, as his visitor was the chief of the Otokodate. "It is a small matter, sir," said Jiuyémon. "Your younger brother Hikarobai is intimate with a woman named Kashiku, whom he meets in secret. Now, this Kashiku is the mistress of the son of a gentleman to whom I am under great obligation. He bought her of her parents for a large sum of money, and besides this, he paid your brother 30 ounces of silver some time since, on condition of his separating himself from the girl. In spite of this, it appears that your brother continues to see her, and I have come to beg that you will remonstrate with your brother on his conduct, and make him give her up." "That I certainly will. Pray do not be uneasy. I will soon find means to put a stop to my brother's bad behavior." And so they went on talking of one thing and another, until Jiuyémon, whose eyes had been wandering about the room, spied out a very long dirk lying on a cupboard, and all at once it occurred to him that this was the very sword which had been a parting gift to him from his lord. The hilt, the mountings, and the tip of the scabbard were all the same, only the blade had been shortened and made into a long dirk. Then he looked more attentively at Chobai features, and saw that he was no other than Akagoshi Jiuyémon, the pirate chief. 2 years had passed by, but he could not forget that face. Jiuyémon would have liked to have arrested him at once, but thinking that it would be a pity to give so vile a robber a chance of escape, he constrained himself, and taking his leave, went straightway and reported the matter to the governor of Osaka. When the officers of justice heard of the prey that awaited them, they made their preparations forthwith. 3 men of the secret police went to Chobai wine shop and, having called for wine, pretended to get up a drunken brawl. And as Chobai went up to them and tried to pacify them, one of the policemen seized hold of him, and another tried to pinion him. It at once flashed across Chobai's mind that his old misdeeds had come to light at last. So with a desperate effort, he shook off the two policemen and knocked them down, and, rushing into the inner room, seized the famous Tsukesada sword and sprang upstairs. The three policemen, never thinking that he could escape, mounted the stairs close after him. But Chobai, with a terrible cut, cleft the front man head in sunder, and the other two fell back appalled at their comrade fate. Then Chobai climbed onto the roof, and looking out, perceived that the house was surrounded on all sides by armed men. Seeing this, he made up his mind that his last moment was come, but at any rate, he determined to sell his life dearly and to die fighting. So he stood up bravely when one of the officers, coming up from the roof of a neighboring house, attacked him with a spear, and at the same time several other soldiers clambered up. Chobai, seeing that he was overmatched, jumped down, and before the soldiers below had recovered from their surprise, he had dashed through their ranks, laying about him right and left, and cutting down 3 men. At top speed he fled, with his pursuers close behind him, and, seeing the broad river ahead of him, jumped into a small boat that lay moored there, of which the boatmen, frightened at the sight of his bloody sword, left him in undisputed possession. Chobai pushed off and sculled vigorously into the middle of the river, and the officers there being no other boat near were for a moment baffled. One of them, however, rushing down the river bank, hid himself on a bridge armed with a spear and lay in wait for Chobai to pass in his boat. But when the little boat came up, he missed his aim and only scratched Chobai's elbow, and he, seizing the spear, dragged down his adversary into the river and killed him as he was struggling in the water. Then, sculling for his life, he gradually drew near to the sea. The other officers in the meantime had secured 10 boats, and having come up with Chobai, surrounded him. But he, having formerly been a pirate, was far better skilled in the management of a boat than his pursuers, and had no great difficulty in eluding them. So at last he pushed out to sea, to the great annoyance of the officers, who followed him closely. Then Jiuyémon, who had come up, said to one of the officers on the shore, "Have you caught him yet?" "No, the fellow is so brave and so cunning that our men can do nothing with him. He is a determined ruffian, certainly. However, as the fellow has got my sword, I mean to get it back by fair means or foul. Will you allow me to undertake the job of seizing him?" "Well, you may try, and you will have officers to assist you if you are in peril." Jiuyémon, having received this permission, stripped off his clothes and jumped into the sea, carrying with him a policeman mace, to the great astonishment of all the bystanders. When he got near Chobai's boat, he dived and came up alongside, without the pirate perceiving him until he had clambered into the boat. Chobai had the good Tsukesada sword, and Jiuyémon was armed with nothing but a mace. But Chobai, on the other hand, was exhausted with his previous exertions, and was taken by surprise at a moment when he was thinking of nothing but how he should scull away from the pursuing boats. So it was not long before Jiuyémon mastered and secured him. For this feat, besides recovering his Tsukesada sword, Jiuyémon received many rewards and great praise from the governor of Osaka. But the pirate Chobai was cast into prison. Hikarobai, when he heard of his brother capture, was away from home, but seeing that he too would be sought for, he determined to escape to Yedo at once, and traveled along the Tokaido, the great highroad, as far as Kwana. But the secret police had got wind of his movements, and one of them was at his heels disguised as a beggar, and waiting for an opportunity to seize him. Hikarobai, in the meanwhile, was congratulating himself on his escape, and, little suspecting that he would be in danger so far away from Osaka, he went to a house of pleasure, intending to divert himself at his ease. The policeman, seeing this, went to the master of the house and said, "The guest who has just come in is a notorious thief, and I am on his track, waiting to arrest him. Do you watch for the moment when he falls asleep, and let me know. Should he escape, the blame will fall upon you." The master of the house, who was greatly taken aback, consented of course, So he told the woman of the house to hide Hikairo by Dirk, and as soon as the latter, wearied with his journey, had fallen asleep, he reported it to the policeman, who went upstairs, and having bound Hikairo as he lay wrapped up in his quilt, led him back to Osaka to be imprisoned with his brother. When Kashiku became aware of her lover's arrest, she felt certain that it was the handiwork of Jiuyémon, so she determined to kill him, were it only that she might die with Hikairo. So hiding a kitchen knife in the bosom of her dress, she went at midnight to Jiuyémon house and looked all round to see if there were no hole or cranny by which she might slip in unobserved. But every door was carefully closed, so she was obliged to knock at the door and feign an excuse. "Let me in, let me in. I am a servant maid in the house of Kajiki Taziémon, and am charged with a letter on most pressing business to Sir Jiuyémon." Hearing this, one of Jiuyémon's servants, thinking her tale was true, rose and opened the door, and Kashiku, stabbing him in the face, ran past him into the house. Inside, she met another apprentice who had got up, aroused by the noise. Him too she stabbed in the belly, but as he fell he cried out to Jiuyémon, saying, "Father, father, take care. Some murderous villain has broken into the house." And Kashiku, desperate, stopped his further utterance by cutting his throat. Jiuyémon, hearing his apprentice cry out, jumped up, and lighting his night lamp, looked about him in the half-gloom and saw Kashiku with the bloody knife, hunting for him that she might kill him. Springing upon her before she saw him, he clutched her right hand, and having secured her, bound her with cords so that she could not move. As soon as he had recovered from his surprise, he looked about him and searched the house, when, to his horror, he found one of his apprentices dead, and the other lying bleeding from a frightful gash across the face. With the first dawn of day, he reported the affair to the proper authorities and gave Kashiku in custody. So, after due examination, the two pirate brothers and the girl Kashiku were executed, and their heads were exposed together. The fat wrestlers of Japan, whose heavy paunches and unwieldy, puffy limbs, however much they may be admired by their own country people, form a striking contrast to our Western notions of training, have attracted some attention from travelers, and those who are interested in athletic sports may care to learn something about them. The first historical record of wrestling occurs in the 6th year of the Emperor Suinin, 24 BC, when one Tama no Kehea, a noble of great stature and strength, boasting that there was not his match under heaven, begged the emperor that his strength might be put to the test. The emperor accordingly caused the challenge to be proclaimed, and one Nomi no Shikune answered it, and having wrestled with Kehea, kicked him in the ribs and broke his bones, so that he died. After this, Shikune was promoted to high office, and became further famous in Japanese history as having substituted earthen images for the living men who, before his time, used to be buried with the coffin of the Mikado. In the year AD 858, the throne of Japan was wrestled for. The Emperor Buntoku had two sons, called Koreishido and Koreitaka, both of whom aspired to the throne. Their claims were decided in a wrestling match, in which one Yashiro was the champion of Koreishido, and Natora the champion of Koreitaka. Natora having been defeated, Koreishido ascended his father's throne under the style of Seiwa. In the 8th century, when Nara was the capital of Japan, the Emperor Shamu instituted wrestling as part of the ceremonies of the autumn festival of the 5 grains, or harvest home. And as the year proved a fruitful one, the custom was continued as auspicious. The strong men of the various provinces were collected, and one Kiyobayashi was proclaimed the champion of Japan. Many a brave and stout man tried to throw with him, but none could master him. Rules of the ring were now drawn up, and in order to prevent disputes, Kiyobayashi was appointed by the emperor to be the judge of wrestling matches, and was presented, as a badge of his office, with a fan, upon which were inscribed the words "the Prince of Lions." The wrestlers were divided into wrestlers of the eastern and of the western provinces, Omi being taken as the center province. The eastern wrestlers wore in their hair the badge of the hollyhock, The Western wrestlers took for their sign the gourd, flower. Hence the passage leading up to the wrestling stage was called the flower path. 48 various falls were fixed upon as 12 throws, 12 lifts, 12 twists, and 12 throws over the back. All other throws not included in these were foul, and it was the duty of the umpire to see that no unlawful tricks were resorted to. It was decided that the covered stage should be composed of 16 rice bales, in the shape of one huge bale supported by 4 pillars at the 4 points of the compass, each pillar being painted a different color, thus, together with certain paper pendants, making up 5 colors to symbolize the 5 grains. The civil wars by which the country was disturbed for a while put a stop to the practice of wrestling. But when peace was restored, it was proposed to re-establish the athletic games, and the umpire Kiyobayashi, the Prince of Lions, was sought for. But he had died or disappeared and could not be found, and there was no umpire forthcoming. The various provinces were searched for a man who might fill his place, and one Yoshida Ietsugu, a rōnin of the province of Echizen, being reported to be well versed in the noble science, was sent for to the capital and proved to be a pupil of Kiyobayashi. The right of acting as umpire in wrestling matches was vested in his family, that the driving wind might for future generations preside over athletic sports. In ancient days, the prizes for the 3 champion wrestlers were a bow, a bowstring, and an arrow. These are still brought into the ring, and at the end of the bout, the successful competitors go through a variety of antics with them. To the champion wrestlers to 2 or 3 men, only in a generation the family of the driving wind awards the privilege of wearing a rope, girdle. In the time of the shogunate, these champions used to wrestle before the shogun. At the beginning of the 17th century, AD, 1606, wrestling matches, as forming a regular part of a religious ceremony, were discontinued. They are still held, however, at the shrines of Kamo, at Kyoto, and of Kasuga in Yamato. They are also held at Kamakura every year, and at the shrines of the patron saints of the various provinces, in imitation of the ancient customs. In the year 1620, 31 Akashi Shigenasuke obtained leave from the government to hold public wrestling matches in the streets of Yedo. In the year 1644 was held the first wrestling match for the purpose of raising a collection for building a temple. This was done by the priests of Kafukuji in Yamashiro. In the year 1660, the same expedient was resorted to in Yedo, and the custom of getting up wrestling matches for the benefit of temple funds holds good to this day. The following graphic description of a Japanese wrestling match is translated from the Yedo Henjoki. From daybreak till 8 in the morning, a drum is beaten to announce that there will be wrestling. The spectators rise early for the sight. The adversaries having been settled, the wrestlers enter the ring from the east and from the west. Tall, stalwart men are they, with sinews and bones of iron. Like the gods Neo, they stand with their arms akimbo, and facing one another they crouch in their strength. The umpire watches until the 2 men draw their breath at the same time, and with his fan gives the signal. They jump up and close with one another, like tigers springing on their prey, or dragons playing with a ball. Each is bent on throwing the other by twisting or by lifting him. It is no mere trial of brute strength. It is a tussle of skill against skill. Each of the 48 throws is tried in turn. From left to right, and from right to left, the umpire hovers about, watching for the victory to declare itself. Some of the spectators back the east, others back the west. The patrons of the ring are so excited that they feel the strength tingling within them. They clench their fists and watch their men without so much as blinking their eyes. At last one man, east or west, gains the advantage, and the umpire lifts his fan in token of victory. The plaudits of the bystanders shake the neighborhood, and they throw their clothes or valuables into the ring, to be redeemed afterwards in money. Nay, in his excitement, a man will even tear off his neighbor's jacket and throw it in. Before beginning their tussle, the wrestlers work up their strength by stamping their feet and slapping their huge thighs. This custom is derived from the following tale of the heroic or mythological age. After the 7 ages of the heavenly gods came the reign of Tensho Daijin, the sun goddess and first empress of Japan. Her younger brother, Sasanuro no Mikoto, was a mighty and a brave hero, but turbulent, and delighted in hunting the deer and the boar. After killing these beasts, he would throw their dead bodies into the sacred hall of his sister, and otherwise defile her dwelling. When he had done this several times, his sister was angry and hid in the cave called the Rock Gate of Heaven, and when her face was not seen, there was no difference between the night and the day. The heroes who served her, mourning over this, went to seek her, but she placed a huge stone in front of the cave and would not come forth. The heroes, seeing this, consulted together and danced and played antics before the cave to lure her out. Tempted by curiosity to see the sight, she opened the gate a little and peeped out. Then the hero Tajikero, or Great Strength, clapping his hands and stamping his feet, with a great effort grasped and threw down the stone door, and the heroes fetched back the sun goddess. As Tajikero is the patron god of strength, wrestlers, on entering the ring, still commemorate his deed by clapping their hands and stamping their feet as a preparation for putting forth their strength. The great daimyos are in the habit of attaching wrestlers to their persons and assigning to them a yearly portion of rice. It is usual for these athletes to take part in funeral or wedding processions and to escort the princes on journeys. The rich wardsmen or merchants give money to their favorite wrestlers and invite them to their houses to drink wine and feast. Though low, vulgar fellows, they are allowed something of the same familiarity which is accorded to prize, fighters, jockeys, and the like, by their patrons in our own country. The Japanese wrestlers appear to have no regular system of training. They harden their naturally powerful limbs by much beating and by butting at wooden posts with their shoulders. Their diet is stronger than that of the ordinary Japanese, who rarely touch meat. Mitford Tales of Old Japan, Chapter 6, The ETA Maiden and the Hatamoto. Those who witnessed the opening of the port of Kabe on the 4th of February, 1868, will not soon forget that day. Civil war was raging, and the foreign legations, warned alike by the flames of burning villages and by the flight of the shogun and his ministers, had abandoned Osaka to seek refuge at Kabe, where, unlike their former quarters, they were not separated from their ships by more than 20 miles of road occupied by armed and excited troops, with the alternative of crossing in tempestuous, whether a dangerous bar which had already cost many valuable lives. It was a fine winter day, and the place swarmed with bustle and with the coming and going of men busy in the care of housing themselves and their goods. Suddenly, a procession of armed men of the Bizen clan was seen to leave the town and advance along the high road toward Osaka, and for no apparent reason. It was afterwards alleged that 2 Frenchmen had crossed their line of march. There was a halt, a stir, and the giving of a command. Little puffs of white smoke rose, and the sharp ping of rifle. Bullets came whizzing over the open ground, aimed at the foreign settlement. As fast as the repeating breech, loaders could be discharged. Fortunately, their practice was very bad, for had the men of Bizen been good shots, nearly all the chief foreign officials in the country, together with many merchants and private gentlemen, must have been killed. As it happened, only 2 or 3 were wounded. Bad marksmen though they were, they proved mighty runners, for they soon discovered that they had attacked a hornet's nest. In an incredibly short space of time, the guards of the several legations and the sailors and marines from the men of war were in hot pursuit of the enemy, who scampered over the hills as fast as their legs could carry them, leaving their baggage ingloriously scattered along the road, many a cheap lacquered hat and flimsy paper cartridge, box being preserved by our blue jackets as trophies. So complete was the stampede that the enemy loss amounted only to one aged coolie, too decrepit to run, taken prisoner after 17 revolver. Shots had been fired at him without effect. And the only injury our men inflicted was upon a solitary old woman who was accidentally shot through the leg. Were it not for the grave nature of the offense, an attack upon the flags of all the treaty powers, and for the terrible retribution thereby inevitably exacted, the affair would have been chiefly remembered for the ludicrous incidents it produced. The mounted escort of the British legation executed a brilliant cavalry charge down an empty road. A very pretty line of skirmishers across the fields fired away much ammunition to no effect. Earthworks were thrown up, and Kabay was held in military occupation for 3 days, during which alarms were frequent. Cutting out expeditions employed armed boats, steamers were seized, and all manner of martial effervescence prevailed. In fact, it resembled fox hunting. It had all the excitement of war with only 10% of the danger. The kind-hearted doctor of the British legation first thought of the poor old woman who had been wounded and was bemoaning herself piteously. When she was carried in, a great difficulty arose, one that I need hardly say was overcome. For the poor creature belonged to the Edas, the pariah caste whose presence is held to pollute even the humblest Japanese house. The native servants strongly objected to her being treated as a human being, asserting that the legation would be forever defiled if she were admitted within its sacred precincts. No account of Japanese society would be complete without notice of the Edas, and the following tale, I think, illustrates well the position they occupy. Their occupations are to slaughter beasts, work leather, attend upon criminals, and perform other degrading tasks. Several accounts are given of their origin. The most probable is that when Buddhism, whose tenets forbid the taking of life, was introduced, those who earned a living by inflicting death became accursed, their trade rendered hereditary, much as the office of executioner was in some European countries. Another account declares them descendants of the Tartar invaders, left behind by Kublai Khan. Some further facts connected with the Edas are given in a note at the end of this tale. Once upon a time, some 200 years ago, at a place called Honjo in Yedo, there lived a Hatamoto named Takoji Genzaburo. He was about 24 or 25 years of age and of extraordinary personal beauty. His official duties required him to go to the castle by way of the Adzuma Bridge, and here it was that a strange adventure befell him. There was a certain Ada who earned his living by going to the Adzuma Bridge every day and mending the sandals of passers-by. Whenever Genzaburo crossed the bridge, the Ada was always in the habit of bowing to him. When the Ada heard this, he was put out of countenance and remained silent for a while. But at last, taking courage, he said to Genzaburo, "Sir, having been honored with your commands, I am ashamed. I was originally a gardener and used to go to your honor house and help trim the garden. In those days, your honor was very young, and I myself little better than a child. I used to play with your honor and received many kindnesses. My name, sir, is Chikichi. Since then, I have fallen by degrees into dissolute habits and have gradually sunk to be the vile creature that you now behold." When Genzaburo heard this, he was greatly surprised, and recalling his old friendship with his playmate, was filled with pity and said, Surely you have fallen very low. Now all you have to do is to persevere and use your utmost endeavors to find a means of escape from the class into which you have fallen, and become a wardsman again. Take this sum, small as it is, let it be a foundation for more to you." With these words, he took 10 rios from his pouch and handed them to Chikichi, who at first refused the gift, but when it was pressed upon him, accepted it with thanks. Genzaburo was leaving to go home when 2 wandering singing girls approached and spoke to Chikichi. So Genzaburo looked back to see what the women were like. And when she smiled, 2 lovely dimples appeared in her cheeks. In all her movements, she was gentle and refined. Genzaburo fell in love with her at first sight, And she, seeing what a handsome man he was, fell equally in love with him, so that the woman with her, perceiving they were smitten with one another, led her away as fast as possible. Genzaburo remained stupefied, and turning to Chikichi said, "Are you acquainted with those two women who came up just now?" "Sir," replied Chikichi, "those are two women of our people. The elder is called Okuma, and the girl, only 16, is named Okoyo. She is the daughter of one Kahachi, a chief of the Etas. She is a very gentle girl in addition to being exceedingly pretty. All our people praise her loudly." When he heard this, Genzaburo was lost in thought for a while, and then said to Chikichi, "I want you to do something for me. Are you prepared to serve me in whatever respect I may require?" Chikichi answered he was prepared to do anything in his power to oblige his honor. On this, Genzaburo smiled and said, "Well then, I am willing to employ you in a certain matter, but as there are many passers, by here I will go and wait for you in a tea house at Hanakawato. When you have finished here, you can join me and I will speak to you." With these words, Genzaburo left and went to the tea house. When Chikichi had finished his work, he changed his clothes and hurried to the tea house, inquiring for Genzaburo, who waited for him upstairs. Chikichi went up and began to thank him for the money he had bestowed. Genzaburo smiled, handed him a wine cup, invited him to drink, and said, "I will tell you the service upon which I wish to employ you. I have set my heart upon that girl Okoyo, whom I met today upon the Adzuma Bridge, and you must arrange a meeting between us." When Chikichi heard this, he was amazed and frightened, and for a while made no answer. At last he said, "Sir, there is nothing I would not do for you after the favors I have received. If this girl were the daughter of any ordinary man, I would move heaven and earth to comply. But for your honor, a handsome and noble Hatamoto, to take as concubine the daughter of an Eita is a grave mistake. By giving a little money, you can secure the handsomest woman in town. Pray, sir, abandon the idea." Upon this, Genzaburo was offended and said, "This is no matter for you to advise upon. I have told you to get me the girl, and you must obey." Chikichi, seeing that his words were of no avail, considered how to bring about a meeting between Genzaburo and Okoyo, and replied, "Sir, I am afraid when I think of the liberty I have taken. I will go to Kahachi House, and will use my best endeavors with him to bring the girl to you. But for today it is getting late, and night is coming on. I will therefore speak to her father tomorrow." Genzaburo was delighted to find Chikichi ready to serve him. "Well," said he, "the day after tomorrow I will await you at the tea house at Oji, and you can bring Okoyo there. Take this present, small as it is, and do your best for me." With this, he drew 3 ryos from his pocket and handed them to Chikichi, who declined with thanks, saying he had already received too much and could accept no more. But Genzaburo pressed him, adding that if the wish of his heart were fulfilled, he would do still more for him. So Chikichi, in great glee at the good luck, began to revolve all manner of schemes in his mind, and the two parted. But Okoyo, who had fallen in love at first sight with Genzaburo on the Adzuma Bridge, went home and thought only of him. Sad and melancholy she sat, and her friend Okuma tried in various ways to comfort her. But Okoyo yearned with all her heart for Genzaburo, and the more she reflected, the more she perceived that, as the daughter of an Eita, she was no match for a noble Hatamoto. And yet, despite this, she pined for him and bewailed her own vile condition. Now it happened that Okuma was in love with Chikichi and thought of him night and day. One day when Chikichi went to visit Kahachi the Eita chief, Okuma, seeing him arrive, was highly delighted and received him politely. And Chikichi, interrupting her, said, "Okuma, I want you to answer me a question. Where has Okoyo gone to amuse herself today?" "Oh, you know the gentleman who was talking with you the other day at the Adzuma Bridge. Well, Okoyo has fallen desperately in love with him, and says she is too low-spirited and out of sorts to get up yet." Chikichi was greatly pleased to hear this, and said to Okuma, "How delightful! Why, Okoyo has fallen in love with the very gentleman who is burning with passion for her, and who has employed me to help him. However, as he is a noble Hatamoto and his whole family would be ruined if the affair became known, we must endeavor to keep it as secret as possible." "Dear me," replied Okuma. "When Okoyo hears this, how happy she will be, to be sure. I must go and tell her at once." "Stop," said Chikichi, detaining her. "If her father, Master Kahachi, is willing, we will tell Okoyo directly. You had better wait here a little until I have consulted him." With this, he went into an inner chamber to see Kahachi, and after talking over the day news, told him how Genzaburo had fallen passionately in love with Okoyo and had employed him as go-between. He then described how he had received kindness from Genzaburo when he had been in better circumstances, dwelt on his lordship's wonderful personal beauty, and on the lucky chance by which he and Okoyo had met. When Kahachi heard this, he was greatly flattered and said, "I am sure I am very much obliged to you. For one of our daughters, whom even the common people despise and shun as a pollution, to be chosen as the concubine of a noble Hatamoto, what could be a greater matter for congratulation?" So he prepared a feast for Chikichi and at once went to tell Okoyo the news. For the maiden, who had fallen head over heels in love, there was no difficulty in obtaining her consent to all that was asked. Accordingly, Chikichi, having arranged to bring the lovers together the following day at Oji, was preparing to go and report the glad tidings to Genzaburo. But Okoyo, who knew that her friend Okuma was in love with Chikichi, and thought that if she could throw them into one another's arms, they would keep silence about herself and Genzaburo, worked so skillfully that she gained her point. At last, Chikichi, tearing himself from Okuma embraces, returned to Genzaburo and told him how he had planned to bring Okoyo to him the next day at Oji, and Genzaburo, beside himself with impatience, waited for the morrow. The next day, Genzaburo, having made his preparations and taking Chikichi with him, went to the tea house at Oji and sat drinking wine, waiting for his sweetheart to come. As for Okoyo, half in ecstasy and half shy at the idea of meeting the man of her heart, she put on her holiday clothes and went with Okuma to Oji. As they went out, her natural beauty enhanced by her smart dress, people turned to look and praise her pretty face. After a while, they arrived at Oji and entered the agreed tea house, and Chikichi, going out to meet them, exclaimed, "Dear me, Miss Okoyo, his lordship has been all impatience waiting for you. Pray make haste and come in." But in spite of his words, Okoyo, out of maidenly modesty, would not go in. Okuma, however, not so particular, cried out, "Why, what is the meaning of this? As you have come here, Okoyo, it is a little late to make a fuss about being shy. Do not be a little fool, come in with me at once." With these words, she caught Okoyo's hand, and pulling her by force into the room, made her sit down beside Genzaburo. When Genzaburo saw her modesty, he reassured her, saying, "Come, what is there to be so shy about? Come a little nearer to me, pray." "Thank you, sir. How could I, who am such a vile thing, pollute your nobility by sitting beside you?" As she spoke, blushes mantled her face. The more Genzaburo looked, the more beautiful she appeared, and the more deeply he became enamored of her charms. Meanwhile, he called for wine and fish, and all four made a feast. When Chikichi and Okuma saw how matters stood, they retired discreetly to another chamber, leaving Genzaburo and Okoyo alone together, looking at one another. "Come," said Genzaburo, smiling, "hadn't you better sit a little closer to me?" "Thank you, sir, really I am afraid." But Genzaburo, laughing at her idle fears, said, "Do not behave as if you hated me." "Oh dear. I am sure I do not hate you, sir. That would be very rude. Indeed, it is not the case. I loved you when I first saw you at the Azuma Bridge and longed for you with all my heart. But I knew to what despised race I belonged and that I was no fitting match for you, so I tried to be resigned. Yet I am very young and inexperienced and could not help thinking of you and you alone. And then Chikichi came, and when I heard what you had said about me, I thought, in the joy of my heart, it must be a dream of happiness." As she spoke, blushing timidly, Genzaburo was dazzled by her beauty and said, "Well, you are a clever child. I am sure, now, you must have some handsome young lover of your own, and that is why you do not care to come and drink wine and sit by me. Am I not right, eh? Ah, sir, a nobleman like you is sure to have a beautiful wife at home, and then you are so handsome that, of course, all the pretty young ladies are in love with you. Nonsense. Why, how clever you are at flattering and paying compliments. A pretty little creature like you was just made to turn all men's heads, a little witch. Ah, those are hard things to say of a poor girl. Who could think of falling in love with such a wretch as I am? Now pray tell me all about your own sweetheart. I so long to hear about her. Silly child. I am not the sort of man to put thoughts into the heads of fair ladies. However, it is quite true that there is someone whom I want to marry." At this, Okoyo began to feel jealous. "Ah," said she, "how happy that someone must be. Do, pray tell me the whole story." A feeling of jealous spite came over her and made her quite unhappy. Genzaburo laughed as he answered, "Well, that someone is yourself and nobody else." There, and as he spoke, he gently tapped the dimple on her cheek with his finger. Okoyo's heart beat with such joy that for a little while she remained speechless. At last she turned her face towards Genzaburo and said, "Alas, your lordship is only trifling with me when you know that what you have been pleased to propose is the darling wish of my heart. Would that I could go into your house as a maid, servant, in any capacity howsoever mean, that I might daily feast my eyes on your handsome face. Ah, I see you think yourself very clever at hoaxing men, and so you must needs tease me a little." And as he spoke, he took her hand and drew her close to him, and she, blushing again, cried, "Oh, pray wait a moment while I shut the sliding doors. Listen to me, Okoyo. I am not going to forget the promise I made you just now, nor need you fear that I will harm you, but take care you do not deceive me. Indeed, sir, the fear is rather that you should set your heart upon others. But although I am no fashionable lady, take pity on me and love me well and long. Of course. I shall never care for another woman but you. Pray, pray, never forget those words you have just spoken." "And now," replied Genzaburo, "the night advances and for 2 days we must part, but we will arrange matters to meet again in this tea house." And so, much against their will, they tore themselves apart. Genzaburo returned home and Okoyo went back, her heart filled with joy at having found the man she had pined for. From that day forth they constantly met in secret at the tea house, and Genzaburo, in his infatuation, never reflected that the affair must sooner or later become notorious, and that he himself might be banished and his family ruined. He cared only for the pleasure of the moment. Now Chikichi, who had brought about the meeting between Genzaburo and his love, used to go each day to the tea house at Oji, taking Okoyo with him, and Genzaburo neglected all his duties for the pleasure of these secret meetings. Chikichi saw this with great regret and thought that if Genzaburo gave himself up entirely to pleasure and laid aside his duties, the secret would certainly be exposed, and Genzaburo would bring ruin upon himself and his family. So he began to devise a plan to separate them, and plotted as eagerly to estrange them as he had formerly plotted to introduce them. At last, he hit upon a device which satisfied him. Accordingly, one day he went to Okoyo's house, and meeting her father, Kahachi said to him, "I have got sad news to tell you. My Lord Genzaburo family have been complaining bitterly of his conduct in carrying on his relationship with your daughter, and of the ruin exposure would bring upon the whole house. So they have used their influence to persuade him to be reasonable and to give up the connection. Now his lordship feels deeply for the damsel, yet he cannot sacrifice his family for her sake. For the first time he has become alive to the folly he has been guilty of, and, full of remorse, has commissioned me to devise some stratagem to break off the affair. Of course this surprises me, but as there is no gainsaying the right of the case, I had no option but to promise obedience. This promise I have come to redeem, and now pray advise your daughter to think no more of his lordship." When Kahachi heard this, he was surprised and distressed, and told Okoyo immediately. She, grieving over the sad news, took no thought for eating or drinking and remained gloomy and desolate. In the meanwhile, Chikichi went to Genzaburo house and told him that Okoyo had been taken suddenly ill and could not meet him, begging him to wait patiently until she sent word of her recovery. Genzaburo, never suspecting the story false, waited 30 days, and still Chikichi brought no tidings of Okoyo. At last, he met Chikichi and besought him to arrange a meeting with Okoyo. "Sir," replied Chikichi, "she is not yet recovered, so it would be difficult to bring her to your honor. But I have been thinking much about this affair, sir. If it becomes public, your honor family will be plunged into ruin. I pray you, sir, to forget all about Okoyo." "It is all very well for you to give me advice," answered Genzaburo, surprised. "But having once bound myself to Okoyo, it would be pitiful to desert her. I therefore implore you once more to arrange that I may meet her." However, he would not consent on any account, so Genzaburo returned home and thenceforth daily entreated Chikichi to bring Okoyo to him, receiving nothing but advice and becoming very sad and lonely. One day Genzaburo, intent on ridding himself of the grief of separation from Okoyo, went to the Yashiwara and entering a house of entertainment ordered a feast prepared. But amid gaiety, his heart yearned for his lost love, and his merriment was mourning in disguise. At last the night wore on. As he was retiring along the corridor, he saw a man of about 40 with long hair coming towards him, who, on seeing Genzaburo, cried, "Dear me! Why, this must be my young lord Genzaburo who has come out to enjoy himself." Genzaburo thought this strange, but looking attentively at the man, he recognized him as a retainer he had employed the year before, and said, "This is a curious meeting. Pray, what have you been about since you left my service? At any rate, I may congratulate you on being well and strong. Where are you living now?" "Well, sir, since I parted from you, I have been earning a living as a fortune teller at Kanda, and have changed my name to Kaji Seizan. I live in a poor and humble house, but if your lordship, at your leisure, would honor me with a visit, well, it is a lucky chance that has brought us together, and I certainly will go and see you. Besides, I want you to do something for me." "Shall you be at home the day after tomorrow?" "Certainly, sir. I shall make a point of being at home." "Very well then, the day after tomorrow I will go to your house." "I shall be at your service, sir." "And now, as it is getting late, I will take my leave for tonight." "Good night, then." "We shall meet the day after tomorrow." And so the two parted and went their several ways to rest. On the appointed day, Genzaburo made his preparations and went in disguise without retainers to call upon Seizan, who met him at the porch of his house and said, "This is a great honor. My lord Genzaburo is indeed welcome. My house is very mean, but let me invite your lordship into an inner chamber." "Pray," replied Genzaburo, "do not make any ceremony for me. Do not put yourself to any trouble on my account." And so he passed in, and Seizan called to his wife to prepare wine and condiments. They began to feast. At last Genzaburo, looking Seizan in the face, said, "There is a service I want you to render me, a very secret service. But if you were to refuse me, I should be put to shame. Before I tell you what that service is, I must know whether you are willing to assist me in anything I may require of you." "Yes, if it is anything within my power, I am at your disposal." "Well then," said Genzaburo, greatly pleased, drawing 10 rios from his bosom, "this is but a small present to make on my first visit, but pray accept it." "No, indeed. I do not know what your lordship wants of me, but at any rate I cannot receive this money. I must beg your lordship to take it back." But Genzaburo pressed it upon him, and at last Seizan was obliged to accept the money. Genzaburo then told the whole story of his love for Okoyo, how he first met and fell in love with her at the Idzuma Bridge, how Chikichi had introduced her at the tea house at Oji, and how when she fell ill and he sought to see her again, Chikichi, instead of bringing her, had only given him good advice. Thus Genzaburo painted a lamentable picture of his despair. Seizan listened patiently, and after reflecting replied, "Well, sir, it is not a difficult matter to set right. Yet it will require some little management. If your lordship will do me the honor of coming to see me again the day after tomorrow, I will cast about in the meanwhile and let you know then the result of my deliberations." When Genzaburo heard this, he felt greatly relieved, and recommending Seizen to do his best, took his leave and returned home. That very night Seizen, after thinking over all Genzaburo had told him, laid his plans and went to Kahachi, the Ada chief house, and told him of the commission he had been entrusted with. Kahachi was of course astonished and said, "Some time ago Chikichi came here and said that my lord Genzaburo, having been rebuked by his family for his profligate behavior, had determined to break off his connection with my daughter." Of course I knew that the daughter of an Eta was no fitting match for a nobleman. So when Chikichi told me his errand, I had no alternative but to tell my daughter she must give up thoughts of his lordship. Since that time she has fretted and pined and starved for love. But when I tell her what you have just said, how glad and happy she will be. Let me go and talk to her at once." With these words, he went to Okoyo's room, and seeing her thin, wasted face and how sad she was, he felt more pity and said, "Well, Okoyo, are you in better spirits today? Would you like something to eat?" "Thank you, I have no appetite." "Well, at any rate, I have news that will make you happy. A messenger has come from my lord Genzaburo, for whom your heart yearns." At this Okoyo, who had been crouching like a drooping flower, gave a great start and cried, "Is that really true? Pray tell me all about it as quickly as possible." The story Chikichi told us, that his lordship wished to break off the connection, was all an invention. He has all along been wishing to meet you, and constantly urged Chikichi to bring you a message. It is Chikichi who has been throwing obstacles in the way. At last, his lordship has secretly sent a man called Kaji Seizen, a fortune teller, to arrange an interview between you. So now, my child, cheer up and go to meet your lover as soon as you please." When Okoyo heard this, she was so happy she thought it must be a dream and doubted her own senses. Kahachi, meanwhile, rejoined Seizen in the other room, and after telling him of his daughter Joy, set before him wine and other delicacies. "I think," said Seizen, "the best way would be for Okoyo to live secretly in my lord Genzaburo house, but as it must never be known to the world, it must be managed very quietly. Further, when I get home, I must devise a plan to lull the suspicions of that fellow Chikichi, and will let you know my idea by letter. Meanwhile, Okoyo had better come home with me tonight. Although she is so terribly out of spirits now, she shall meet Genzaburo the day after tomorrow." Kahachi reported this to Okoyo. Since her pining for Genzaburo was the cause of her sickness, she recovered her spirits at once, and, saying she would go with Seizen immediately, joyfully made preparations. Then, as it was late, he advised her to rest, showed her to her apartments, went to his own room and wrote his letter to Kahachi containing the scheme he had devised. When Kahachi received his instructions, he admired Seizen's ingenuity, and putting on an air of great alarm and agitation, went immediately to call on Chikichi and said to him, "Oh, Master Chikichi, such a terrible thing has happened. Pray let me tell you all about it." "Indeed, what can it be?" "Oh, sir," answered Kahachi, pretending to wipe away tears, "my daughter Okoyo, mourning over her separation from my lord Genzaburo, first refused all sustenance and nursed her sorrows until last night, her woman heart failing to bear her great grief. She drowned herself in the river, leaving a paper on which she had written her intention." When Chikichi heard this, he was thunderstruck and exclaimed, "Can this really be true? And when I think that it was I who first introduced her to my lord, I am ashamed to look you in the face. Oh, say not so. Misfortunes are the punishment due for our misdeeds in a former state of existence. I bear you no ill will. This money I hold was my daughter. In her last instructions, she begged that it might be given, after her death, to you through whose intervention she became allied with a nobleman. Please accept it as my daughter legacy to you." And as he spoke, he offered him 3 ryos. "You amaze me," replied Chikichi. "How could I, above all men, who have so much to reproach myself with in my conduct toward you, accept this money? Nay, It was my dead daughter wish. But since you reproach yourself when you think of her, I beg you to put up a prayer and cause masses to be said for her." At last Chikichi, after much persuasion and to his own distress, was obliged to accept the money. When Kahachi had carried out all Seizen instructions, he returned home laughing in his sleeve. Chikichi was sorely grieved to hear of Okoyo's death and remained thinking over the sad news. When suddenly looking about him, he saw something like a letter lying on the spot where Kahachi had been sitting, so he picked it up and read it. As luck would have it, it was the very letter containing Seizen instructions to Kahachi, in which the whole story that had affected him so much was fabricated. When he perceived the trick, he was very angry and exclaimed, "To think I should have been so hoaxed by that hateful old dotard and such a fellow as Seizen. And Genzaburo too. Out of gratitude for favors I had received from him in old days, I faithfully gave him good advice, all in vain. Well, they have gulled me once, but I will be even with them yet and hinder their game before it is played out." He worked himself into a fury and went off secretly to prowl about Seizen House to watch for Okoyo, determined to pay off Genzaburo and Seizen for their conduct. Meanwhile Seizen, who did not suspect what had happened, on the day fixed by him and Genzaburo made Okoyo put on her best clothes, smartened up his house, and got a feast ready for Genzaburo arrival. Genzaburo came punctually and, entering at once, said to the fortune teller, "Well, have you succeeded in the commission I entrusted to you?" At first Seizen pretended to be vexed and said, "Well, sir, I have done my best, but it is not a matter that can be settled in a hurry. However, there is a young lady of high birth and wonderful beauty upstairs who has come secretly to have her fortune told. If your lordship would like to come with me and see her, you can." But Genzaburo, on hearing he was not to meet Okoyo, lost heart entirely and made up his mind to go home again. Seizen, however, pressed him so eagerly that at last he went upstairs to see this vaunted beauty. Seizen, drawing aside a screen, showed him Okoyo sitting there. Genzaburo started and, turning to Seizen, said, "Well, you certainly are a first-rate hand at keeping up a hoax. I cannot sufficiently praise how you have carried out my instructions. Pray do not mention it, sir. But as it is a long time since you have met the young lady, you must have much to say to one another. I will go downstairs, and if you want anything, call me." So he went downstairs and left them. Then Genzaburo, addressing Okoyo, said, "Ah, indeed it is a long time since we met. How happy it makes me to see you again. Why, your face has grown quite thin. Poor thing, have you been unhappy?" Okoyo, tears starting from her eyes for joy, hid her face. Her heart was so full she could not speak. But Genzaburo, passing his hand gently over her head and back and comforting her, said, "Come, sweetheart, there is no need to sob so. Talk to me a little and let me hear your voice." At last Okoyo raised her head and said, "Ah, when I was separated from you by Chikichi tricks and thought I should never meet you again, how tenderly I thought of you. I thought I should die and waited for my hour, pining all the while for you. When at last, as I lay between life and death, Seizen came with a message from you, I thought it was all a dream." As she spoke, she bent her head and sobbed again. In Genzaburo's eyes, she seemed more beautiful than ever with her pale, delicate face, and he loved her more than before. Then she said, "If I were to tell you all I have suffered until today, I should never stop." "Yes," replied Genzaburo, "I too have suffered much." And so they told one another their mutual griefs, and from that day forth they constantly met at Seizen House. One day, as they feasted in an upper story of Seizen House, Chikichi came and said, "I beg pardon, but does one Master Seizen live here?" "Certainly, sir. I am Seizen at your service." "Pray, where are you from?" "Well, sir, I have a little business to transact with you." "May I make so bold as to come in?" With these words, he entered the house. "But who and what are you?" said Seizen. "Sir, I'm an Ada and my name is Chikichi. I beg to bespeak your goodwill. I hope we may be friends." Seizen was taken aback. However, he put on an innocent face as though he had never heard of Chikichi and said, I never heard of such a thing. Why, I thought you were a respectable person, and you have the impudence to tell me your name is Chikichi and that you are one of those accursed Edas. To think a shameless villain should come and ask to be friends with me. Get you gone, the quicker the better. Your presence pollutes the house. Chikichi smiled contemptuously and answered, So you deem the presence of an Ada in your house a pollution, eh? Why, I thought you must be one of us. Insolent knave. Begone as fast as possible. Well, since you say I defile your house, you had better get rid of Okoyo as well. I suppose she must equally be a pollution to it. This put Seizen in a dilemma. However, he made up his mind not to show hesitation and said, What are you talking about? There is no Okoyo here. I never saw such a person in my life. Chikichi quietly drew from his dress bosom the letter from Seizen to Kahachi, which he had picked up days before, and showing it to Seizen replied, If you wish to dispute the genuineness of this paper, I will report the whole matter to the governor of Yedo. Genzaburo family will be ruined, and the rest of you parties in this affair will share the trouble. Just wait a little. As Chikichi pretended to leave, Seizen, at his wit's end, cried, Stop, stop. I want to speak to you. Pray stop and listen quietly. It is quite true, as you said, that Okoyo is in my house. Your indignation is perfectly just. Come, let us talk matters a little. You yourself were originally a respectable man. Although you have fallen in life, there is no reason your disgrace should last forever. All you want to escape this fraternity of Edas is a little money. Why should you not get this from Genzaburo, who is anxious to keep his intrigue with Okoyo secret? Chikichi laughed disdainfully. I am ready to talk, but I do not want money. All I want is to report the affair to the authorities, so I may be revenged for the fraud put upon me. Will not you accept 25 rios? 25 rios. No, indeed. I will not take less than 100. If I cannot get them, I will report the whole matter at once. Seizen, after a moment consideration, hit upon a scheme and answered smiling. Well, Master Chikichi, you are a fine fellow and I admire your spirit. You shall have the 100 rios you ask for. But as I have not so much money by me, I will go to Genzaburo house and fetch it. It is getting dark now, but not very late. I will trouble you to come with me, and then I can give you the money tonight. Chikichi consented, and the pair left the house together. Now Seizen, who as a rōnin wore a long dirk in his girdle, watched for a moment when Chikichi should be off his guard to kill him. But Chikichi kept his eyes open and gave Seizen no chance. At last Chikichi, as ill luck would have it, stumbled on a stone and fell. Seizen, profiting by the chance, drew his dirk and stabbed him in the side. As Chikichi, surprised, tried to rise, Seizen cut him severely over the head until he fell dead. Seizen then looked around, and seeing to his great delight there was no one near, returned home. The following day, Chikichi's body was found by the police. When they examined it, they found nothing upon it save a paper, which they read and which proved to be the very letter Seizen had sent to Kahachi and which Chikichi had picked up. The matter was immediately reported to the governor, and Seizen having been summoned, an investigation was held. Seizen, cunning and bold murderer as he was, lost self-possession when he saw what a fool he had been not to recover from Chikichi the letter he had written. When put to a rigid examination under torture, he confessed that he had hidden Okoyo at Genzaburo instigation, and then killed Chikichi, who had discovered the secret. Upon this, the governor, after consulting about Genzaburo case, decided that as he had disgraced his position as a Hatamoto by contracting an alliance with the daughter of an Ada, his property should be confiscated, his family blotted out, and he himself banished. As for Kahachi the Ada chief and his daughter Okoyo, they were handed over for punishment to the chief of the Edas and by him banished, while Seizen, against whom the murder of Chikichi had been fully proved, was executed according to law.